world need a wheelchair. And that's equivalent to more than the UK population. Sorry, this is coming up in my screen. There's 275 million people in the world who have a vision impairment. That's about 3/4 of the US population. And there's more than 460 million people that have a disabling hearing impairment, equivalent to the EU pre-Brexit. I know it's early, but at least now you remember why you signed up. Somebody,
my camera's gone off.
Somebody needs to turn their mute on. So our goals for the next couple of days are that we don't bore you, that you walk away with an understanding of how you can easily embed disability confidence into your organization, and be reassured that colleagues with disabilities and neurodiversities can be highly productive in the workplace, given the appropriate support. So there's an exciting lineup to help make your organization more disability confident. We lead with a few introductory sessions. These will flag the importance of culture and human intervention. It's not all going to be about assistive technology. And we'll have a brief reminder of our legal obligations and the future policy direction. After this, we get to the meat. As I've mentioned, the two big domain areas we look at this morning are physical and communication. And this group of sessions will address support of people with motor neuron disease, cerebral palsy, MS, Parkinson, and others, followed by sensory sessions. So this is to support people with vision and hearing loss. This will take us through to approximately 9:55 to 10, from 9:55 to 10, and at 12 we get to the workshops. So we've got 3 workshops lined up, and unfortunately you're going to have to choose between them. So there's one on physical and communication, one on vision, and one on hearing. There's a few things to look out for. There's a break at 10:30. Each session will last for about 15 minutes, so they're designed to be quite quick and snappy. Each domain area will include, so, if we're talking about vision, there'll be a section on best practice, and then we'll show you some of the tools that exist to support people with vision disability. Throughout the 2-day session, you've got the option to turn on closed captioning. This is aimed at people who are hearing impaired, but these systems are amazing. So if you struggle to understand one of the speakers, this might be a useful tool. I hear they pick up Irish accents pretty well. At the end of the 2-day session, each delegate will get a takeaway. So this is a framework stroke checklist document to help your organization be more disability confident. The other thing that's going to be included in there is a list of experts and solutions providers, which you might also find useful after the event. And one last thing, tomorrow we'll be looking at neurodiversity and mental health. So we get to our first speaker, who I'm looking forward to. Our first speaker is Steve Tyler. So Steve has an international reputation as the Accessibility Director at Leonard Cheshire. For more than 70 years, Leonard Cheshire has been supporting disabled people in the UK and around the world, operating nationally and globally with 6,000 staff and 4,000 volunteers. They support over 90,000 disabled people. If we were charging for this conference, Steve's talk alone would be worth the ticket price. His insights are always valued for money. So welcome, Steve.
Flattery gets you everywhere.
Thank you, everybody. And in the short space of time I've got, I'm going to try and give you an overview of where I am in this space and leave with you some thoughts. This conference is hugely important. I think it's one of the most stubborn challenges we have. In all of my career, I've been in this accessibility business for, near on 30 years. And we have not seen a significant shift in employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And it's an absolutely critical thing to get right. And I hope, if I do nothing else in the next 10 minutes, I inspire you to at least pay attention to it. The fact that you're here means that you're doing that in any case, but that we're going to leave you with a set of actions at the end that you're able to take away from this conference, the ambition and the wherewithal and some tools to perhaps help you on your way. I don't want to dwell too much on the ethical issues, the moral issues, the challenges around disability access. There are plenty of those, and there are so many conferences you could go to learn about specific types of disability in depth. I'm going to leave you with, start off with two broad figures, and they're deliberately UK based. You can see from those numbers, though, that you can expand those out throughout the world. There are about 14.4 million people in the UK with disabilities. That translates to a family expenditure power of £250 billion. So my message is a really, really simple one on one level. Getting diversity right, embracing people with disabilities in the workplace actually makes business sense. That by definition, if you're able to reflect who your audience is, and you all know this, that you've got half a chance of selling your product or your service. And to sell your product or your service, making sure that accessibility and the way in which you deliver those services and product is meaningful is a critical part of what we all do. And by default, if you can ensure that without even thinking about it, the products and services you deliver are accessible and deliver to a diverse audience, by definition, you're going to reach some of that expenditure that I talked about. Families, friends, people make decisions for the 1/5 of the population, or with the 1/5 of the population who have a disability. They make decisions with them in mind. If there is a choice between an accessible product and an inaccessible one, they're going to go for the accessible one. If there's something that is inclusive versus not inclusive, this isn't rocket science. You all know this stuff. But how do you do it? How do you begin to change the culture such that the workplace genuinely is an inviting place for people to work? And it is really, on the one level, difficult in the sense that, I mean, in the past 30 years, I remember having lots of conversations with senior marketing people who told me in no uncertain terms that the disability community was a minority group. And what they meant by that most of the time was that they don't really understand it. And it's difficult to penetrate, it's difficult to understand. Everybody seems to have slightly different needs. It's all quite difficult. But I suppose, and there are difficulties when you get into the specifics of each and every different type of disability. What you're really talking about is individuals. We don't say there are difficulties with individuals around this table. We don't talk about the needs and wants and differences within each individual. We talk about broad markets, and we can think about people with disabilities as broad markets too. And yes, if you have trouble walking, or you can't walk, or you have movement challenges or cognitive challenges, you bring challenges to the party and benefits to the party. And I'm not just saying that because of where I work, or because somehow I'm an advocate for people with disabilities. That really isn't the point. I genuinely mean that actually the way in which people think about society and the way we think about each other and so on does require us, I believe, to think much more holistically than we've ever thought before. And we've also got the tools to do that these days, and be able to market our products and services in much more beneficial and significant ways to individuals. Actually, we've been doing some work on what I've referred to as extended user profiles, and that's how I tend to think about this challenge. Don't even think about disability, just think about the different needs and wants you have in different situations. And the really obvious examples that everybody knows, like, I don't know, if you're carrying bags, by definition, you've not got access to your hands for any other purpose right this second. If you're pushing a wheelchair, by definition, you need access in a similar way to people that are currently using a wheelchair. So what do you do about it? How do you get your organization ready? And I would urge you, actually, we all have a role in this. It's not an HR issue. It's not just a finance or a procurement or a property development or any other issue. It's everybody. Everybody needs to own this issue if we're going to bring change about. And in particular, I think a critical part of where we go from here is that we begin to acknowledge the changing face of work and the workforce. Just a thought for you. Over the next 10 or so years, my prediction is that the gig economy, as we discuss it now, it will change and it will morph into very different things. But actually, the traditional way that employers take on people will change. I'm pretty sure that what will begin to happen is that we buy services from people who advertise their wares online or who advertise their wares elsewhere. And we need to be accommodating. If what we want is what that person offers, then we need to be accommodating of their requirements as well as our own. So what does it mean? Some quick tips. Think about the people that are around you right now, those people who are fearful about telling you whether or not they have a disability. One of the simplest things that employers can do is to set up a disability employee network. Invite people to talk about whether they want to count it in terms of disability or any other way they want to talk about it. What are their needs in the workplace? What would make them feel more comfortable? How can the workplace be more accommodating for them as individuals? And right there, you're beginning that dialogue and that process and the cultural change. Accessible information, absolutely critical. Think about the way you construct websites, the way you construct documents, the way you articulate what you offer, the way you reach out to people as an employer or a potential employer. So not just around what you offer in terms of the market, but also how you reach out to people when you're recruiting. And by default, not making assumptions about who you might have. Really obvious stuff, which includes things like, I don't know, if what you mean is you need to be able to travel for work, then say so, not you need a driving license. There are lots of ways of wording the offer such that you attract a much wider and more diverse audience. Procurement is a critical part of the way we think about things. And there are accessibility guidelines aplenty. If you want to procure a new website, there are WCAG guidelines. If you want to set up a new property, there are environmental and property development guidelines, property design guidelines. By putting those in the mix in your procurement policies, right there, you're beginning to win. And buildings, property and environment, by the way, I mean, they are the most obvious barriers to entry. If you literally can't get into your building, it sends a message right there to people that come to visit you, whether it's as an employee or anything else. So for me, the critical issue isn't just thinking about disability, it's thinking about the whole person and what we want from each other in the workplace, and beginning to change cultures such that we're more open with each other about our needs and wants and requirements. We're more responsive as employers, and we all know, you know, everybody's going through the kind of challenges that we've seen as in Britain as part of Brexit, certainly as part of COVID-19. The challenges around employment right now is forcing a change around how we think about our staff, how we value our staff, how we think about what they bring to the party, what we want out of them, and how reasonable or otherwise our expectations are, and what the genuine offer is for most of us. And again, you know this, and it's no different for people with disabilities, or for that matter, anybody else. We place value on ourselves based on what we do. A lot of the time when people ask what I do, I describe myself in terms of my employment. I describe myself in terms of what I bring to the party. And yes, part of that is my family and my friends, and hopefully I as an individual, but actually it's what I contribute and how I want to change the world or change my little part of it. In the same way, people with disabilities are no different to that. The issue a lot of the time is there isn't a way of engaging. So opening those engagement mechanisms, making sure that people can have dialogue, being a listening employer begins that engagement process. We have to change where we are at the moment, simply because I believe over the next 20 to 30 years, the population will change massively. We're living longer, our needs are changing, there will be more online work and more online education propositions. We will work from home or very diverse locations, and by definition, we're going to have to begin to accommodate more seriously different needs, different people in different form factors. And in short, that means we need to engage with the needs and wants of individuals in our workforce. Have a great time over the next couple of days. You're going to be exposed to some amazing stuff. At the moment, in Leonard Cheshire, for example, we're using eye gaze technology and that allows people to navigate and use products by where they focus their vision. We're using translation systems that have been tweaked such that people can begin to, with what were known as significant speech impairments, be able to communicate both with smart home devices and with each other pretty naturally. And those things are set to change in an enormous way over the next 15 to 20 years. We're using brain actuation technologies that enable people to think about what it is they want to do and activate through those thought processes an activity or a function that they want to bring about. These things are real. They're massive opportunities technically, But for all the great technology that's out there, and for all the great legislative changes that I and many others have been attached to bringing about, we have not shifted the 20% employment rate that currently exists in the disability community. That has to change if we're to maximize the benefits of a diverse workforce, and we have to shift it if we're going to reach some of that diverse market. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Fantastic as usual. I mean, I really like that idea of extended user profiles to help us design products and websites and services. It's a really nice way of thinking about it. Robert McLaren asked a question. He says, what do employers worry about the most, do you think?
I think employers, the best way I can describe my experience in all the time I've worked in this field, and certainly Leonard Cheshire's experience, is fear. It's not necessarily expressed as fear. It's not a frightening, in inverted commas, proposition to employ a person with a disability, but frankly, it's an unknown quantity. I think the short version is, if you've got a short list of 5 people that interview, one of them has a disability and 4 don't, and to all intents and purposes, everything is equal, you're going to go for the non-disabled person, because the perception is you're buying yourself challenges, and those challenges are ones you don't necessarily know how to deal with. It's just seen as a problem. And then I think part of the challenge too is that we're a poor cousin to some of the other extraordinary changes that we've seen over the past sort of 30 or 40 years. We've not been as good in the disability community for whatever reason. I think probably diversity is one of those reasons. But we've not been as good as securing our place in the minds of would-be employers, would-be educators, etc., and providing solutions. You know, putting ourselves forward. You know, when you compare the you know, take race, for example, is an obvious example, or the rights of women in the workplace. I think most people understand that, and it's reasonably easy to understand the challenge there. But it doesn't necessarily buy you, you know, to employ a woman. It makes sense to absolutely everybody. It's very difficult to understand why you wouldn't. Whereas with somebody with a disability, I think you're immediately seeing challenges. Somebody in a wheelchair, for all the reasons that I've mentioned, comes into your business. Well, you know, where are they going to sit? You know, what about the loos? What about, you know, and how do you go about fixing those challenges? And really, have you got the wherewithal to do it? And do you have the support of the rest of your staff and your team to do it? So yes, I do think we need to see more showcases of these things. Companies that really get this and who really have embraced it. You know, I cite Microsoft in some of my examples in these. Microsoft, you know, would say themselves they're by no means perfect, and there are all sorts of things they're still trying to learn and so on. But they have embraced it to the degree that they entirely recognize the notion that by having a diverse workforce, by definition, means that they don't have to think about accessibility as something really very special that you pull out. And we all know it's not just a mantra. If you design accessibility from the get-go, you're winning the game. Retrofitting tends not to work.
Thanks, Steve. Steve, I'd love to keep talking to you. We're running into our next slot. So thank you ever so much for that, Steve. Our next speaker is going to be Paul Doyle. And there's a slight change of plan here. We were initially going to talk about funding. So what I'm going to do, instead of having Paul talk about funding, is put up a PDF of an access to work white paper, which is very good at explaining what we need to know. And we're going to use Paul's time to speak about some of the cultural issues in the workplace, because Paul Doyle gets into the soul of people with disabilities. He's been doing it for years. He emanates empathy. This has led him to being a trusted AT consultant with clients in the telecare, assistive robotics, and smart home industries. Paul's company, Bush & Company, are engaged in expert witness assignments for the assistive tech sector. So I'm going to hand you over to Paul.
Hi, Noel. Thank you. Sorry for any technical glitches there. Yes. How do I follow Steve? Very engaging, very informative conversation. And when I was thinking about sort of my presentation, when we started talking about funding to Noel, what I began to realise was, I suppose, the notion that when we talk about an assistive technology implementation, it's not the be all and end all of the process. So as Noel said, I've worked in assistive technology now for nearly 27 years in a variety of situations. And I suppose if I can give you anything this morning, what I will do is give you the benefit of me crashing and burning on multiple occasions. And so if I can prevent an organization or an individual going through the pain that I've gone through, then I'll have considered that my time here this morning has been spent well. Whilst I was listening to Steve, I couldn't agree with him more, and I suppose to some extent he's crossing into the conversation that I was going to have with you guys this morning in relation to the preparation and the implementation of assistive technology in the workspace. And I suppose why I was initially talking to Noel about funding was that the AT implementation is not the end. There has to be some degree of preparation of the organisation and the people that support the individual who's working in the team with a disability to effectively embed them within the organisation, within the team, and so, as I said, it's not the end of the process when a person's had an assessment, had their technology provided to them, given them some cursory training, and then they sit at their desk or at their place of work and they're expected then to get on with the job. And I would say at that point, that's when I've had the crashing and burning moments myself. I have on occasion carried out access to work assessments for individuals, and the process itself is relatively brief, and we look at the barriers that the person's facing to accessing ICT usually, and what I found over the process of over the years is that it's not just using the technology, it's about putting that technology into context. And sometimes organizations feel that once the assessors come in, written the report, and maybe carried out, as I say, the initial training, that challenge has now been overcome, that person is now able to function fully within their chosen role. And it's just not the case. And I think there is an effort, well, from my perspective, we need to be putting effort into understanding the job roles itself. An example would be, I worked with a young lady a few years ago, and she had a short-term disability which required, it meant that she could no longer type for a period of time. So we were looking at voice recognition technology, and so eventually, we went to a proprietary brand, and she had the training in that. But when she actually started to use the technology in anger in her role, we found that it didn't actually work seamlessly with the email system that she was utilizing. And so therefore it sat on her desk, not being used for several months because she didn't really know where to go, because we didn't understand effectively what her job role entailed. We didn't actually unpick the role itself and identify where those pinch points were. And I think it's the pinch points that are often overlooked in the assessment and the development of a sort of an easing into the workplace. And that made me realize from my perspective is that I had an understanding of the application of the technology in relation to, say, education, but not necessarily in employment. I didn't understand the role that this individual was undertaking to the degree that it would have made a difference when we did start implementing the technology. And so if I, who would be considered as somebody with some degree of knowledge and expertise in this field, was letting this person down, it made me feel that what support is her employer getting? It didn't feel, and doesn't feel to me, that employers in and of themselves are reticent or resistant to employing individuals with disabilities. And to a certain extent, I've written it down in big letters. Employees worry about most, that when Steve was talking about that, was that they don't know what to do when either things go wrong or the support has been withdrawn. And it's not their fault, because, as I said before, often it's the case that people think that once the assistive technology implementation has taken place, that's the end of the process. But that person's then got to work for the next months, years, for the rest of their employment lives in that space. And I, or people like me, will intervene or assess very briefly at the beginning of the process, and then abandon the poor employer to their own ends. And I think to a certain extent, that reiterating what Steve was saying, there needs to be additional support for the individuals, but equally additional support for the employer, so that they understand the challenges that their employee is facing, how to effectively, and again, this is just a straightforward practical issue, how to reset the machine if it goes AWOL, how to plug in the devices, how to charge them if you're using devices that need charging. And so providing support for the employer and those that work with the individual is just as important as providing the technology and the training for the individual themselves. And why we were talking about funding is that there is an intrinsic cost to that. I think if we think about an individual turning up for work on day one and then working seamlessly without any intervention from any other individual, then there's no cost, there is no perceivable cost there. But if you're, as an employer, and I know employers want to do this, entertain and support the individuals with disabilities, then there is an investment. And I said that's that funding, that additional cost. There is an investment in understanding that the team understands how to support that individual, the challenges that they face, but equally the organization has the capacity to deal with the challenges that may be faced. So they're not left on their own effectively. And I think that's a cultural thing as well. I mean, Steve alluded to the equality and diversity training that's prevalent at the moment. And I agree, that has been a fantastic move forward in the employment area. However, when we talk about equality and diversity, we talk about individuals perhaps with disabilities. The one thing we never talk about is individuals using assistive technology, which is a natural progression from that conversation around about equality and diversity. So maybe, and I think this is a clarion call to employers, when you do your ED training, maybe you also talk about the notion that you talk about individuals and their assistive technology and how that assistive technology can make an impact in the workplace. From my perspective, I think if we look at the implementation of assistive technology as a preparation, implementation, and then post-implementation sort of follow-up, then you're supporting the individual, you're supporting the team that they're working within, you're breaking down the barriers. And I know that's a cliche, but we all try and accept individuals for who they are. However, I find that understanding is the greatest tool for breaking down barriers. If you understand why the technology is being used, how it's being used, and where it sits within the context of your organization, then the little chinks of doubt that can turn into fear and reticence, they can be ironed out immediately. So I think from my perspective, we need to think about the notion that when we carry out an assistive technology intervention, it's not just a case of understanding the user's needs, it's understanding the context within which the individual fits. Now, I've got many an anecdote where I've implemented assistive technology from the perspective of an engineer, and unfortunately, or fortunately for me, my previous background was electrical engineering. Excuse me. And I spent a long time fixing things, and fixing things is a good thing for me because it was very time limited. It was broken, it was fixed. However, what I didn't realize with assistive technology especially is that technology is not just about what the technology does, it's about what it means. It's about understanding the context within which it's used, and that's equally applicable within the home or within the workspace. And I've watched technology fail, not because it doesn't do its job, but it's because it's been implemented ineffectively. It's made the person who is using that technology feel different. It's made them feel less confident, and as a consequence, the situation has spiraled out of control. They've stopped using their assistive technology, and we've had to intervene because effectively, this person now no longer wants to use it. So if we're going to get anything from my discussion this morning, it's about take an holistic approach. I know it's a cliche, but the holistic approach just isn't around the individual's needs. It's about the individual's needs and those that surround them. If we get the process in place before they are, oops, I'm beeping, before they are actually even considering joining the organization, then I think we've got a good chance of increasing the population of individuals with impairments within the workspace. Thank you very much for your time this morning, guys.
Oh, thanks, Paul. That was definitely better than access to work. Just to reinforce what Paul said there, one of our blind colleagues here, in his first job, he went to one of the big banks, and they hadn't prepared for him in advance. And he spent the first 2 weeks sitting at his desk doing nothing. And then they sent him home because it was getting embarrassing in the office to have him there sitting doing nothing. And they left him there for 3 months. And then they fired him. And, to our benefit, let me tell you, because he was an absolutely brilliant member of staff, really productive once his AT was put in place. There was one thing I wanted to say as well. While Paul's been speaking, I think we've uploaded the white paper from Access to Work on funding. And Paul, again, thank you ever so much. Thank you ever so much. Really important. Okay, so our next talk is from Robert McLaren. Robert's going to talk about policy and legislation. He is a policy guy and has really helped to raise the profile of people with disabilities, especially in government circles. He is head of assistive and accessible technology at the cross-party think tank Policy Connect. Robert's team provide the secretariat for the all-party parliamentary group for assistive technology. Their most recent report, Talent and Technology, recommended reforms to government policy. This hopes to take advantage of digital technology to support employment of disabled people. Robert, welcome.
Thanks very much. I'll share a few slides and describe them where that's going to be helpful. So as Noel said, one of the things that we do at the cross-party think tank Policy Connect is support the all-party group for assistive technology. So started with an image here of David Blunkett at one of our meetings in Parliament, holding up his own assistive technology, which he will admit is a rather outdated by modern standards phone, but it works for him. I think that's a good lesson on assistive tech. So as an overview, I wanted to look at some key trends in relation to policy and legislation, talk about the Equality Act, access to work, not in the sort of explaining the whole system, but perhaps how it relates to legislation, very briefly disability confident, and also I think interestingly a number of new initiatives that the government is proposing as part of, I've got it on that thing where it sort of moves forward without you wanting it to. In any event, new initiatives that the government's proposing as part of the National Disability Strategy. So the latest figures on the disability employment gap from the Office of National Statistics, published in 2001, obviously because they're published recently, don't take into account the whole period of coronavirus, so we don't know exactly where we sit at the moment, but the gap is about 28%. So what that means is that roughly about half of disabled people are in employment and half are not. That doesn't mean that they're unemployed, they might just be not employed. So they're working age, but may not be looking for work, may not be able to work. But in any event, that's about half. Whereas for non-disabled people, it's nearly sort of 80%. So a 28-point gap, which is really significant, and has been a real feature of government focus over a number of years. It has narrowed from 30, almost 34% in 2014. Part of that narrowing is because more and more people are declaring that they're disabled, rather than necessarily people who are disabled getting into work where they previously would have been not in work. Nonetheless, that's clearly a good news story that more people feel comfortable declaring that they're disabled. Another key trend is around access to work, and where we've seen different types of support rise and fall. So I'll just pick out from a graph that's showing now some of the key points there. So one is that before the pandemic, support workers were roughly stable, but going up fairly steadily in terms of the number of people accessing a support worker. The same for travel, pretty stable, but going up. The same for equipment and aids. It dropped in the early part of the 2010s, but it's been pretty stable since then. Other types of support has again been pretty stable. Mental health service support has absolutely skyrocketed. And during the period of the pandemic, almost every form of support has dropped in terms of the number of people accessing it. The two ones that drop the most are support workers and travel, and that sort of makes sense if you think about fewer people traveling into work due to the pandemic, and maybe people feeling like they're not so confident or not going to get as much from a support worker over remote. Although I think that's that's something to explore a bit more. But again, mental health support continued to increase during the pandemic. And special aids and equipment, which would include assistive technology, dipped, but not a huge amount over the course of the pandemic. So clearly the big piece of legislation that's really relevant to disability employment and assistive technology is the Equality Act from 2010. I'm not going to give any kind of legal advice because I'm not at all qualified to do so. My fiance, who's a barrister works on civil rights, would tell me off a lot for that. But the Equality and Human Rights Commission has really good kind of plain English guidance on this, and the basic kind of concept is the idea of a workplace adjustment, or in the language of the law, reasonable adjustment. I think a lot of employers now talk about a workplace adjustment because it's a sort of more friendly type of language. And that's that the Equality Act in certain circumstances prescribes that employers make adjustments for disabled employees. And I've shown here on this slide all the various headings of the relevant advice section from the Equality and Human Rights Commission website, which I'll share as a link. And it's got headings like making sure the adjustment is effective, providing extra equipment, aids and services. So really pretty kind of comprehensive, and as I say, plain English guidance there. Without going into the sort of full kind of technicalities of applying for access to work and so on. One of the reasons I think to talk about access to work in this context is its relationship to the Equality Act. The government's very clear that access to work doesn't replace or remove Equality Act duties. So the way that they describe it is that it's a grant, not paid in the form of cash, but in the form of support. It's a grant to the employee, not the employer, and it's a grant that contributes to extra costs associated with disability and work, but does not replace the employer's duty under the Equality Act. Now, obviously, in practice, if you think about some of the things that somebody might have access to under access to work, like a piece of assistive technology or some coaching, those are workplace adjustments, and in many cases, those will be reasonable adjustments. And if those adjustments are made via access to work, you don't need to sort of make them again via the Equality Act. You don't need to sort of buy two pieces of kit or something like that. But it is just that principle of you don't get to say, well, I did access to work and therefore, the Equality Act sort of doesn't apply to me anymore. Access to work is a sort of from a legal point of view, an extra piece of support that the government provides, but isn't obligated to. And then just quickly going over eligibility for access to work. So the main one is most people who get access to work is because they're in paid employment. But you can also get it if you have an offer of paid employment, or you're about to set up your own business, if you have a job interview and you need adjustments for the job interview. And then there are some people who are in non-paid short-term work placements, like work trials and work experience. And those will be people who have education, health and care plans and are accessing those short-term work placements via something called the youth contract. Disability confident, I know, is something that will be talked about quite a bit, but just to sort of, again, just very much an overview, I think it's worth just kind of putting it, sort of defining exactly what it is from the government's point of view, again, is that it's support to employers. And that support primarily comes in the form of information and guidance. And the employers that are supported fall into three different levels, depending on what kinds of level of inclusivity they've demonstrated. So level 1 commitment, level 2 confident, level 3 leader. We'll talk a bit more about new proposals around disability confident shortly. So what are the new initiatives? So for those that aren't familiar, the National Disability Strategy was published last summer. It was a Conservative manifesto commitment, which means that it has a real it's a big ticket item for delivery for any government to be able to, at the end of the Parliament, say, we did all the things that we promised to do in our manifesto. This was the big commitment on disability, to publish a strategy on disability that would cross all departments. And clearly, DWP and employment was going to be one of the key strands of a strategy like that. I'm pleased to say as well that employment has been that assistive technology has been an important strand, and it's something that at Policy Connect and at the all-party group, we've worked really closely with the Cabinet Office to develop assistive technology policy ideas for the strategy. For our purposes here, I think some of the sort of trends or new initiatives coming out of the national strategy to keep an eye on. One is the creation of disability access ambassadors. So what that means is that for a number of different sectors, I think it's around about 15 now, and it will continue to grow, somebody within that sector, so let's say insurance or transport, wins the role of being the disability and access ambassador. And their job is to make their sectors more accessible, both to the end user of that sector's services. So again, let's say insurance, but also, I think there's an opportunity for those ambassadors to make their sectors more inclusive as employers. And we'll be talking to the sector ambassadors about that. And I think it perhaps signals a kind of a sectoral shift of emphasis in disability policy, that as the economy recovers, there'll be attempts to really focus in on certain sectors of the economy and see what the government can do to support those sectors into recovery. One could imagine, for example, hospitality and tourism being a sector that gets a lot of attention, and it's also a sector that traditionally has employed quite a lot of disabled people. And so I think we can kind of, I think it's an interesting opportunity to go beyond just talking in really broad terms about what do we do to make employment accessible, but start to think about all sorts of different employment conditions and sectors, and that not all employment is desk-based, and that assistive technology can play a role for people who are doing all kinds of different roles. A really significant one is a pilot that's going to be underway over the next few months of a adjustments passport. So I'm going to cough. I know there's been a number of different passporting schemes that different organizations have trialed for themselves, and this is the first time, sorry, one sec. Sorry, this is the first time that the government itself is taking up the mantle of developing an adjustments passport. In the first instance, what it will mean is that university leavers will work with an assessor to develop a document of their adjustment needs, including technology needs, so that when they go into employment, when they access to work, they'll be able to build from that base. And it's something that can be expanded. We'd like to see a situation where eventually, at the very least, everyone who accesses the disabled students allowance as disabled students in higher education, as part of that, undergoes a passporting process which introduces them to access to work and other features of disability employment support. There's also plans to explore a new kind of access to work, a sort of enhanced access to work for people with more complex needs who need more adjustments. I think that's a lot earlier in its development. People, in other words, who are currently further from employment. There's been a lot of discussion of disability confidence and whether or not, you know, the government's done quite a lot to make sure lots of businesses sign up, but, you know, there's people have rightly said, how meaningful is it when businesses do sign up? Some sign up and take it really seriously, others maybe sign up and don't do as much. So there's initiatives to explore sort of strengthening the requirements, at least at level 2 and 3 of that scheme. And then finally, government's recognized recently that while large employers tend to sort of build institutional knowledge over time about workplace adjustments and inclusive employment through their HR departments, small and medium-sized employers often find that more difficult, and find it more difficult as well to access occupational health services. So there's plans to develop a kind of platform and advice service, particularly targeting SMEs. And I've put a picture up here of the new Minister for Disabled People, new in post, I think in the last month or so, Chloe Smith, who will be responsible for delivering all of these new initiatives. And I know I'm running over time, so I'll just say I had the chance to sort of meet Chloe briefly at Conservative Party conference the other week, and I know that she's got an interest in technology, so sort of watch this space, I think.
Yeah, so thank you, Robert. Robert is doing amazing work, everybody, and raising the profile big time. While Robert was speaking, Lisa will have uploaded Aleister Mcnaught's guide to public sector bodies' web accessibility legislation. This is some new legislation that's come off the back of the recent EU directive. And it includes it's just to say that web accessibility is extending, particularly for public sector bodies, beyond the external website to include the intranet and VLEs and so on. It's beginning to get more demanding of public sector bodies in relation to all items on internal and external websites. Soon be extending to kiosks as well. Robert, thanks ever so much. That was a really good site tour through your world. Moving to our next speaker. So now we're moving into domain areas, and we start with physical and communication difficulties. Our first speaker comes from Diversity and Ability. DNA is an award-winning, disabled-led social enterprise which supports individuals, organizations, and social justice projects. 85% of the team at DNA are disabled or neurodiverse, and we're going to hear from Adam Hyland and Megan Reed, two of their support specialists. Adam was the co-founder, and Megan's been there since 2017. So welcome both.
Thank you, and it's good to be here with you. So thank you for that introduction. Now, it's just really on for that. We're
Yes,
going
please.
to be looking at communication barriers in the workplace today. And we'll go into more detail with case studies a bit later on in the program. But just to continue on from Noel's introduction, I'm Adam Hyland. I'm the Director of Accessibility and Inclusion, which basically means that I get to work with our partners and get excited about diversity and difference on a daily basis. I'm joined today by my wonderful colleague, Megan.
Hiya, I'm Megan. I'm the Head of Innovation and Delivery. And like Adam, I also get to get really excited about inclusion and promoting diversity within workplaces and education. Large parts of my role are delivering training, facilitating workshops, and really trying to work with organisations to break down the barriers that they face when ensuring that everybody can feel supported in the workplace.
But yeah, as Noel has already said, we are a disabled-led social enterprise. Do we employ disabled people to tick a box to say, yeah, aren't we great? No, we employ disabled people because they're talented individuals, and we believe that having lived experience is key to breaking down those barriers and working with our partners to create a more inclusive workplace and society. And as you can see, we're also a disability competent leader, which is the third level that Rob mentioned a couple of minutes ago. What do we do? Well, we do all sorts of different work with one organisation, so we look at creating code change, providing training and executive coaching, but we also support individual disabled people in the workplace to not just survive in their roles, but thrive in their roles. And I think that is a big difference. I think there's a lot of disabled people already in employment who may be masking the barriers that they face and surviving in the workplace. But really what we want to do is work with organisations to create a space where people can thrive and not just survive. That's a bit about DNA. I just wanted to touch on it just because we're really proud of it. and we won 2 awards at the Recruitment Industry Disability Initiative Awards last December for a disability specialist category for all of the work that we've done with organisations in creating a more inclusive recruitment practices. Moving on. I'm really glad that Rob brought up the Equalities Act earlier, and like Rob, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to go into the detail, but I think one thing we wanted to just touch upon is the Equalities Act is a key cornerstone, if you like, for inclusion, and I think it really is a leading piece of legislation. I guess what we just wanted to think about as we go forward today is we've had the Equalities Act since 2010, which is amazing, but does that mean that people are not discriminated against on don't face barriers on a daily basis? Sadly not. So we have this quote where compliance means that you don't get sued, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you include. And I guess what we're touching on here is we need to be aware of what the compliance is. But really, truthfully, if we're ever going to get authentic inclusion where people feel welcomed and people feel like they belong, and we actually get access to a huge pool of talented people, and we need to get the culture in our organisations right. I'm just trying to think about as we go forward, right? That was today.
One of the topics that we were asked to talk about is thinking about how we can support people who experience communication challenges in the workplace. And I think the most important thing to note here is that the way that we start thinking about how we can support individuals is inherently individual. The first thing we need to do is we need to understand what an individual needs. Because if we start thinking about specific diagnoses or specific medicalized labels, we're running the risk of categorizing everybody. For example, if you ask both Adam and I to share one of our particular diagnoses or our own neurodiversity, we might give you the same specific name, but we wouldn't give you the same specific access requirements or the same assistive technology requirements that we need to overcome the barriers we experience. And so I think the most important thing we can do on the very, very first thing we wanted to get in here is that individuals have individual accessibility requirements. So what can we do to ensure that we're supporting those individuals? Well, lots and lots of different things. The first thing we can do, and on the slide on the right-hand side, we have a picture of a triangle. It's got 3 tiers. The bottom tier reads inclusive culture. We then step up to anticipatory approach, and on the top it reads reasonable adjustments. And the reason we've put this together is because the first step to ensuring we're creating an inclusive workplace is to create an inclusive culture. Because by creating inclusive cultures, and we've touched on masking already in the conference today, we're making sure that individuals feel safe to come forward and share they have different needs. By creating that inclusive culture, we're saying, okay, everybody can have a seat at the table, everybody can access what they need to do the work that they need to do. And really crucially, we understand that you're all individual. The first thing we want to do as an organisation is say, you don't actually have to share, you don't have to disclose unless you want to. Because what we're doing as an organisation is putting in place different strategies that mean from the get-go, we're already starting to create a space where we've got inclusion. And that might be as simple as having standardised policies and practices that say our website will only use these fonts, or when we're communicating, we'll ensure that we're always using captions in meetings, or we're always doing things that are standardised and basic across the organisation that start to create that inclusive culture. And that's not because those things inherently help people to access in full. It's also because by doing those small things, we're saying to everybody in the organisation, you're welcome here, and we're willing to accept and we want to embrace the assets that you have as a diverse individual. So once we've got that culture right, we've created a space where people can come forward and share things if they want to. we then have to anticipate that we'll have difference in our workplace, because by anticipating we've got difference, we can embrace that difference. So that means putting in place things that everybody can access, having networked assistive technology, maybe text to speech, speech to text, that everyone can access on an ad hoc basis without having to ask for it specifically. There's an awareness campaign that says these things are here for you. We've anticipated there'll be people who need those things, who might want to use them. And then at the tip of the iceberg, we have reasonable adjustments. And that's when we have individualized workplace adjustments to ensure that individual needs are met. So that might be a network piece of assistive technology they've tried and they've liked the approach of a particular piece of text to speech, but actually maybe that individual might benefit from a very specific piece of text to speech that would come as an individualized adjustment that would be purchased just for them. I'll pass back to Adam.
Yeah, I'm really glad that Paul Doyle mentioned earlier about assistive technology and integrating it into disability inclusion training, because I think for many years assistive technology has often been seen as special tech for special people, but in reality we all use assistive technology, and we just need to normalize more technology and embed it in our organization. If you think about it, how many people use glasses or contact lenses? So many people. We don't think of it as assistive technology because we've normalized it into our day-to-day lives. But like Google Maps, so many people use Google Maps, we don't see it as assistive technology. But is it not assisting us to get from A to B? So it's that craziness anticipatory approach where we just embed different ways of working and different technology into our organizational workplace. So DNA helps individuals in many different organizations using our enablement hub. And we're going to get a case study later today in our workshop about how we support someone who has communication barriers. And the enablement hub really looks at how we can assess individual needs, because like Megan said earlier, just because someone has the same diagnosis doesn't mean that they experience the same impacts and the same barriers. So we will touch on how we look at a case study around communication barriers in the workplace a bit later on. But I guess
thank you, Adam. It's thank you, Adam and Megan. Apologies, we're running into our next slot. Adam and Megan are running the workshop slot on physical and communication difficulties at 12 o'clock. Next, we're going to see some of the technology in action. For people with physical disabilities, we learn about eye gaze technology. And for people who struggle to speak, we'll see what communication assistive tech exists. The company providing the magic today is Toby. So Toby's mission is to make groundbreaking assistive technology and communication solutions to give people with disabilities a voice. Joe Nairn-Singh works with end users and professionals to train them on Toby solutions. So who better to show us what the solutions do? Joe, welcome.
Thank you, Noel. Cheers for the introduction. So yeah, I'm here, and thank you for having us on today. I'm here from Toby Dynavox. So I'm an account manager for Toby Dynavox. So my role is I'm based in Manchester, and I cover quite a wide area, but my role is to take our assistive technology solutions out to customers, to clients, to individuals who want to try them, and then also to provide training on those to the people working with those individuals and to, say, schools or NHS professionals. That's kind of what I do day to day. And as a company, our mission statement is power to be you. The goal of our solutions is to enable people to do things that they used to do or never thought would be possible to do. And we do that through various hardware and software solutions. And that's what I'm going to run through with you today, is the actual technology, the devices, the computers that we create and build and provide, and then what software we're going to run on those devices to allow them to be accessible for our users, and to open up the world to them to access more than they historically or traditionally have been able to. We do that in lots of different ways, but we are the world leader in eye tracking technology. So for those with a physical disability who can't use their hands to access a computer, we provide eye tracking solutions, and that's going to be the focus of what I'm talking about today. I've got, I don't know if you see it on the camera, but I've got an eye tracker that I'm going to put on my laptop. And we're going to try to do some live demonstrations, so we'll see how that goes. But the eye tracker is going to be on my laptop, and I'm going to show you a lot of this stuff that clients use using just their eye movement. So if we jump into it, I suppose I'll just go to this. First thing to talk about is who do we help? Who's Tobii Dynavox for? And we work with a massive range of people with various different disabilities across various different age ranges. And we do lots of different devices, and the devices depend on someone's access method. So are they able to use their hands? And if they can, we have various devices for that. They use switching, head mice, eye tracking. So we do lots of different devices. Devices like the eye tracker I've got here that just go onto your computer or laptop, through to devices like this one in the top left, where it's actually mounted to someone's chair. And then, as I mentioned, what software do we then put on the device to meet that individual's needs? A lot of the people we work with are literate, so they can use a keyboard to type. But a lot of the younger people we meet aren't literate, so we have to think about what we present to them in terms of software so that they're then able to communicate or access the wider world. Main focus of the stuff I'm going to look at today, though, is, as I say, eye tracking solutions, and those for literate users, so access to a keyboard, with a view to get people back to work or into work. And in terms of eye tracking, I won't go into too much detail on this, but we're tracking the individual's pupil. So some of our devices have an eye tracker built in, or in the case of the device I'm going to use today, we attach an eye tracker to an existing device, and it allows the cameras in the eye tracker allow us to track exactly where someone's looking in their screen. So we're actually tracking the pupil, and that means that we can compensate for things like head movement, because even if someone's head is moving, it's actually their eyeball that we're tracking. And this is the device I'm going to use today. So this is called the new PCI. So this is our latest eye tracker. It's what we call a peripheral eye tracker. So you plug it in via USB to any Windows device, and that device then becomes eye trackable. So you can access that device simply using your eye movement. So it's the latest generation. It's lightweight, and you can use it for accessing communication software, but also for accessing a computer and for environmental control. A couple of things that make our eye tracking unique. As I mentioned, we are the world leader in eye tracking, and a couple of things to consider are that we do dark and light pupil tracking within the one eye tracker. Essentially what that means is we can track a massive range of the population to a very high degree of accuracy, because we use different techniques to track the eye, and therefore things like the color of your eye, the shape of your eye, how your eye refracts light. We've got technology in our eye trackers to deal with all those, and still provide you with nice, accurate tracking, precision. Via the eye tracker, you can do what's known as computer control, which we're going to talk about. These trackers will work on a screen of up to 27 inches. Massive development with our eye tracking as of this year is that we can now track people outside, which for someone who's got a device mounted to their chair is huge. If you were outside previously, you had to use alternate ways of communicating because the eye tracker wouldn't work. So this is a huge one for us. You can plug a switch into your eye tracker, which we're not going to touch on too much today, but basically you can aim with your eyes and select with a switch if you have that functionality rather than just using your eyes. We have various software that's compatible with it. They're super accurate. And we've added a few new features, but one of them that's quite nice is that Windows Hello is built into the eye tracker so that someone's eyes will unlock the device. Because historically, from an independence perspective, a lot of time people are having to have caregivers or family log into their device and know their passwords, etc. Whereas you can use your eyes to unlock the device. The one I'm using today, I'm going to mount onto my laptop, and it's a simple magnetic strip on the bottom of your screen, as you can see on the left, that puts the eye tracker in the right position. But we do brackets so that you could attach, a Windows tablet or something like that, and then that device becomes portable rather than being on, say, a fixed monitor at a computer or on a laptop. So that's one type of eye tracking device we do. Another is called the I series, and this is a dedicated communication device. So where someone might use a PCI is, say, on a laptop at work or on a computer at home, but they're obviously then only have access to it when they're at that computer. A lot of the people we work with, especially those using eye tracking for communication, they need the device with them at all times because it's their voice. And so this is a device that's designed and built for that. So it's a dedicated communication device, which means everything's fully integrated into one system. It's a device we've built from the ground up. Outdoor eye tracking, as I say, enables people to communicate wherever they go. There's a partner window on the back. You can see it here, but it's quite a new feature. And basically, for someone who's communicating, it means that whatever they type to speak is displayed on the window, which encourages face-to-face communication. If you've ever worked with someone who has a device on the chair, oftentimes people are looking over their shoulder. So the idea with this is to encourage more face-to-face communication. We have adaptive buttons, which are basically eye-gazeable buttons on the machine that the user can program to perform shortcut functions. They're nice and lightweight and robust, which is important if you've got it with you on your chair all day. Obviously, it's mountable. The speakers are super loud and really clear, and the device will last for 9 hours, so you can have it out with you all day. And it comes installed with our communication software and a pretty extensive warranty that covers things like accidental damage and replacement devices if yours breaks, so that you're not without your voice. So that's the actual devices for eye tracking that we do. And you can see the partner in action here in this image, which is why I've included this slide. So you can see that the message that's been typed with the user's eyes is displayed on the rear of the device. So yeah, that's just a quick overview of the device. So when it comes to communication, we, as I say, the software that we recommend for someone depends on a number of factors, one of which is their literacy level. The software I'm going to talk about today, though, is called Communicator 5, which is for text-to-speech for keyboard users, for people that are literate. So it's an accessible text-to-speech software. It allows for really efficient communication. So obviously, when you're using alternative access, it slows things down. So we want to provide tools that can speed things up as much as possible. We also want to increase independence so that the user can do as much with their device as they can without assistance. And obviously, communication these days is a lot more than just face-to-face communication. So we also have tools in here for long-distance communication, access to social media, phones, emails, etc. And a couple of the key features, I'm going to do a live demo to show you this, but a couple of the key features that allow for this efficient communication are things like having stored phrases, accessing those phrases quickly, having multiple keyboards, being able to change your dwell time, which I'll touch on, but it's essentially the amount of time you have to look at something to select it. And obviously we need various different keyboard layouts, and we need tools that allow the user to edit and change as much of this themselves to allow for that independence. As was mentioned in the kind of previous talk, everyone we work with is an individual with their own individual needs, and they want to be able to personalize the device so that it works for them, it represents them, it's their voice. We think we've got some nice features in our software that allow for that. So if I just switch into our software, And I'll show you a couple of those features quickly, and I'll attach my eye tracker to the laptop. I've already calibrated this eye tracker to myself for my eye. And you'll see as I look around this software, there's a red dot that starts going around. That indicates where I'm looking and my dwell time. So I have to look until the kind of red clock goes all the way around to make a selection. So one of the things we mentioned was independence. This is my kind of home page. If you imagine this like the home of your phone, your smartphone, and you choose which apps you have on your phone, this is a similar concept. So you can see I'm just using my eyes here. I've gone into edit home page by looking. I've got the time set for a second. So I have to look at something for a second. And then from here, I can add new pages to my home page. So if I want to add an accessible way of watching Netflix, I just add that to my home page, like so. And you can see now it's there in the bottom right. So as an eye gaze user, I can edit this and personalize it to have whatever access to whichever apps or tools I want. And I also have access to my settings. So I'm going to look at settings, and you can see here we can do things like change our voice. A lot of people will bank their voice and add it into our devices. There's all kinds of different keyboard layouts depending on somebody's accuracy. They might need larger buttons. Any changes you make to your keyboard are universal. So whatever app you then go in, you get your preferred keyboard. There's various settings for your keyboard in terms of your font sizes and other things. And we've got about, I think it's 48 languages we've got in here now. So people who aren't speaking English, we've got lots of different languages and multiple keyboards for somebody if they're bilingual. Somebody could also come in here and change their dwell time. So I'm set to a second at the moment. So you can see if I go to activation, my dwell time is set to a second. I'm going to make it a bit quicker. So 0.8 of a second. So you'll see that little red clock goes around much more quickly now as I navigate the software. So as I say, we try and make as much available to our users so that they can edit this themselves and personalize it themselves. And then in terms of communication, if I go to speak, I'm presented with my keyboard. And from here, I can start to type by just looking at my keys. So if I wanted to introduce myself, I've typed H. You can see I get word prediction in the first row and phrase prediction on the, on the first row and word prediction on the second row. So I'm going to go, hello, my name is. And then type and speak. So that's obviously, if you've got quite a quick dwell time, that's pretty efficient just using your word and phrase prediction. Anyway, I've done all that literally just using my eyes. The software will learn as you go though. So if I type H again, you can see that the first phrase that's predicted is the one that I've said most recently. I've also got the ability to create my own pre-stored phrases in this section here. So you can see I've got a speech history area, but I've also got all these other categories, and I can create my own phrases within these categories as well to come and grab individual phrases. A couple of other things that are quite nice. So if I come into social and greeting, you can see there's a phrase here that says, I can't talk, but I can hear and understand everything you say. So if I could come in and find that phrase the way I've just done it. But again, we try and add features that increase efficiency where possible. So if as the user, I know that that phrase is in my system, we can call up any phrase in our system using the first letter of each word. So in that instance, I can't talk is what it started with. So it'd be I, C, T. And you can see within 3 hits, that phrase has been called up. And I can speak it really quickly. So nice, efficient ways of being able to communicate. You might have noticed that when I looked at the phrase, the dwell time, so the red indicator slowed down. And the reason for that is we have different dwell times depending on which function we're performing within the software. So if I go on dwell times here, you can see you have one just for general navigation, one for typing, because while I'm navigating, I might need more time to look around and choose what I want. But when I'm typing, I know where all my letters are and I want it nice and quick. And then I want it slower on that word prediction and phrase prediction because I want time to read the phrase before it's selected. And if my dwell time is set at half a second within my keyboard, I might have chosen that phrase whilst I'm trying to read it. We can see it's going nice and slow to give me time to know that's the phrase that I want. Also, if I'm in the middle of building a phrase, I can jump to quick talk, which will open up a secondary keyboard, allow me, you know, if Noel was to ask me if I wanted to have a drink, I can answer him. And then hop back and carry on building my original phrase or sentence without being interrupted. So a couple of the nice features that we've got within our software that make, as I say, communication as efficient as possible. Last thing I want to show you on the communication side, we could talk all day about the various tools, but this one's quite nice. So at the moment we're using a dwell to type, so we look at each letter for a set amount of time. We do have this dwell-free keyboard, which is basically eye swiping to type. So I can basically swipe the entire sentence I want and then produce it. I'm going to try and do that live, which is always a bit risky, but oh, that's gone wrong. 1 second. Let's try it again. Sometimes when we share the screen, the eye tracker.
No. Don't worry about it, Joe. This has been fantastic. I haven't really seen a proper demonstration of AAC devices before, but that's been absolutely fantastic. Joe, are you going to the physical and communication workshop later? I think people would like to know.
I can do.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting for you to be there, I think, because I've already seen somebody say, note to self, talk to Toby.
Okay.
Yeah. So it'd be good if you can rock up. Next, we're going to have a break. Before we do, let me just quickly tell you that the sessions coming up after the break are vision and hearing, and we've got some great speakers. So I look forward to seeing you at 10:45. Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
And thank you, Joe.
Corrected refractive error and cataracts. And most people with a visual impairment are of retirement age. So it's actually a smaller population who are of working age. Key though is that vision impairment is a unique experience. We need to think about degenerative conditions. So as I mentioned, conditions where the person's vision is expected to worsen over time. We also need to think about static conditions where someone may have a condition that is relatively fixed. So I mentioned my own experience. People who will have that, it's important to remember they will also experience the normal effects of aging. So vision loss as they grow older. But we also need to think about fluctuating conditions. This is really tricky. Can you imagine that your vision on a Monday is not too bad, but on Tuesday you're feeling stressed, you maybe haven't slept well, and your vision is significantly worse, and actually you function less well. And that's really hard for colleagues and co-workers to take on board, because people expect to identify a level that someone functions at. and they imagine they might need a certain level of support. So it's really important that we tell people about fluctuating conditions, because the impacts will vary depending on the environment the person's in, their other health factors, how they're feeling, etc. But it's also important to think about related health issues. So conditions where vision impairment might be a consequence. So conditions like cerebral palsy, for example, or multiple sclerosis. Really not thinking about sight loss in a kind of linear way, thinking about it in a multifaceted way. And increasingly, that's what we are seeing organizations doing, which is really good and really positive and to be encouraged. We need to think about the fact that sight loss is often invisible. So most people don't have a white cane or glasses or any kind of outward sign that they have a sight loss. Some people do, but we need to be mindful of the fact that it's often invisible. We have developed a simulator, if you're interested. So we have a simulator for people who have an Android device, and it's called EyeWare, which is EYEWARE, like hardware and software. It's called EyeWare, EYEWARE. And what EyeWare really does is it gives you some visual simulations of common eye conditions, really to try and help you extend your understanding and to help extend the understanding of colleagues around you. It's one step in building that understanding, but it can be quite an instant one. Some of the practical issues that I think people need to be mindful of around meeting, greeting, and guiding. So just thinking about approaching someone in a way that is sensitive. Approach someone and say who you are, because they might not see who you are. If you think someone can't see too well, just say, hi, it's Robin here from the innovation team. And actually, people then have a sense of who it might be. Think about appropriate bodily contact. So often, it might be helpful to put your hand on someone's forearm after you've spoken to them, just to identify where you are. But that might not be appropriate in some cultural contexts. You will know when that's not appropriate. Think about it from an appropriate bodily contact point of view. Lots of tools for technology and communication and inclusion in the workplace. So over the years, I've used tools like Supernova, which has been a screen magnifier. It was Lunar originally that I used when I started out in this game. And that was really about magnifying text and making it bigger, whatever environment I happened to be in with a computer. And that's really been an invaluable bridge to inclusion for me, along with other technologies that are emerging. So Zoom on the Mac platform, Windows Magnifier, which is increasingly developing its capability. It's really important that you think about the tools that are out there, specialist and mainstream, and explore them and encourage your colleagues to explore them. You know, for example, I often say to people, what happens if you press the Windows key and plus on your laptop? And I wonder how many people listening have actually done that, or perhaps they've done it inadvertently. It's a starter into the world of assistive technology, and it's one that I should encourage you to explore. I'd like to also suggest that you explore the amount of accessibility that's in your phone. That has increased significantly over recent years and continues to do so. But, you know, above all else, asking and sharing are absolutely critical strategies for building awareness and extending understanding. It sounds simple, but it can't be understated. Simply asking the person, and if you're unsure, it's the most helpful, most valuable thing you can do is you can ask. So you can say, tell me, what could I do to make it easier for you to access this? And, you know, sometimes it's about someone talking you through something. Sometimes it's about making the font bigger or changing the color contrast, or just enabling people to know where those settings are so that they can do that for themselves. I think above all, it's about being aware. Not all blind and partially sighted people look visually impaired. We don't all have a guide dog or dark glasses or a white cane. It's just being aware. And it's about introducing yourself. You know, this is about people. Don't be shy. If you can see that someone looks like they might need some help, just introduce yourself and ask. So a simple hello, can I help in any way, goes a really long way. I think with that, let's not make assumptions. Don't make assumptions about how you might be able to help. Ask in the first place. So super, super important to do that. And to make sure that we can be helping people on a day-to-day basis, and in the most appropriate way that's going to be going to be supportive for that individual. So I'm mindful of time. We're now on 10:55. I'm going to wrap it there, and we'll hopefully have an opportunity to take some questions.
Thanks, Robin. That was fantastic as usual. One of the questions, well, I've got an immediate question, which is, you mentioned eyewear, which sounds like a really interesting tool for employers so that they can create awareness. Where can you get it?
Absolutely, thanks, Noel. So you can get eyewear from the Google Play Store. So if you simply go into the Play Store on your Android device, go into search and put in eyewear, E-Y-E-W-A-R-E. Just be warned, there are lots of other things called eyewear, which are more kind of cosmetic apps. But eyewear is E-Y-E-W-A-R-E, and you can download it free of charge and let us know how you get on. If you have an iPhone, there is another app which is called Aira, A-I-R-A, Aira Vision Sim. So 3 words, A-I-R-A, Aira Vision Sim. And Aira Vision Sim does very much the same thing as eyewear does on Android. There is an iOS version of eyewear, but it's not stable enough to recommend at this time. So eyewear if you're on an Android device, Aira Vision Sim if you're on an Apple device. So yeah, it's a good conversation starter. I think sometimes when you can go into your own workplace and you can open a condition, so let's just say it's cataract, and you open, an intermediate cataract simulation, that doesn't show you what life is like for someone with cataracts, but it gives you a glimpse into the kind of practical obstacles that person might experience. And that's what can start the conversation and just build people's understanding. So yeah, have a look, show it to people, let us know what you think, and watch this space, because we're doing more in that field.
Okay, and quickly, I don't want to take all the questions here, but if you guys, say RNIB Consultancy, are asked into an organization to advise on the environment for vision impairment, typically what kind of things are you flagging up?
Well, we're looking at a holistic range of factors, really. So we're going in and looking at lighting levels, first of all. We're looking at tonal contrast between floors and walls and doors. I guess as a starter, we're looking at kind of the guidance that's in building standards in terms of accessibility. So obviously ramps and level access and handrails. But we're also looking at more subtle things like, the signage that's used. What kind of font is used? Is that signage accessible to people who maybe don't read print? We're working also with some electronic BIDI code-based navigation systems now, where you can put what's called a NaviLens code on an opening, for example, and that can be detectable by someone who's got no useful sight. So there are lots of different things we're looking at, but the standard kind of considerations around tonal contrast and levels and elevations and signage. And the simplest things from a low vision perspective make the biggest difference. And one of those things would be blinds, window blinds. So think about how you do that, and think about the material that you use. So for example, a wooden blind can be more effective than a fabric one, just in terms of light transmission, but talk to other people about it, talk to other colleagues, because often people think that a low vision person wants no light or lots of light. And the truth is, it's not polarized. Usually the truth for the individual is somewhere in the middle. So just get the conversation going and get people to think about it from that person's perspective where they can. That's just on its own, that's brilliant advice, what you've just told us. Robin, you're running the site workshop at 12 o'clock. Obviously, everybody's welcome to attend that one if you need to hear some more of Robin. Did I have anything else to say quickly? No, I think that was it. Robin, that was fantastic. Thank you. Thanks. So our next speaker
is Richard Owen from the Daisy Consortium. This is about creating accessible content. The Daisy Consortium is a global organization of organizations. Richard's coming, he's taken over my screen. It's typical Richard, I can tell you. Richard is the head of the Daisy Consortium. He is a true expert in accessible reading and accessible systems and disseminating best practice. So all kinds of experts queue up for this guy. He is fantastic, and we're privileged to have him to show us how to effortlessly create accessible content. Thanks, Richard.
Noel, you do a good line in introductions. As the old joke goes, after hearing myself introduced, I can hardly wait to hear myself speak. Okay, so a little bit more about me. I spent more than a decade as a technology officer consulting on workplace adjustments for blind and partially sighted people. And I was also responsible for the accessibility strategy in RNIB for supporting employees with visual impairment and other disabilities. And access to information, access to content is one of the most significant barriers that's faced by people with a visual impairment, whether they have no usable sight or they have some usable sight, like Robin just explained. And so it's something that businesses need to get right. But making information accessible is not particularly more expensive or more complex. It requires some awareness and probably a bit of a shift in some kind of production processes and staff getting used to it, but not too much more than that. So how will people with visual impairment then read information? And Robin talked about the kind of sim apps here. I have on this screen a simulation photograph showing a page of print for someone who has maybe a condition like macular degeneration. It shows a dark, kind of messy area in the center of vision and then some distortion around this. And we have a whole sequence of slides that show how different visual impairments can impact on reading and accessing information. But as Robin says, it's a very individual thing. And in working with individuals, the thing to do is ask those individuals about their individual needs. But what can you do as an organization at the kind of structural level? Well, know that people with vision impairment, some folk will read regular print. Their vision impairment may impact more on their mobility and their ability to get out and about, and regular print information, a regular computer screen may be okay, or they may talk about something called a preferred format being a kind of language that really talked about if people were given hard copy information. So rather than regular print, they might talk about large print or clear print, which is minimum of 14-point print. And we'd recommend actually that published material is in 14-point minimum. They could talk about audio, so they'd be listening to documents and information, or they could be accessing it using Braille. But actually, whilst for those folk who use Braille, it is just a great tool, very few people with a visual impairment actually access Braille. So don't be too surprised if someone is coming for a job with you or works for you, doesn't use Braille, because it tends to be people who've lost their sight earlier in life. So these are kind of preferred formats, hard formats, but these days, and especially in a workplace setting, people are reading digitally. They're reading on the web and they're reading electronic documents. And if a document is made available as an accessible digital document, we sometimes use ears and fingers. So on the screen here, I have a couple of other images. One shows a regular computer running Microsoft Word. And the right-hand side, that text within the document is made really, really large using a screen magnification software. Actually, this one is Supernova. I pinched one of their images. And also there's a speaker next. With this technology, it's possible to take a regular document a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint slide deck, and it can be made larger for someone who wants to use it with larger text, with modified colors, with different fonts. They can listen to it using the computer voice on their computer or smartphone. And they could have it displayed on a device that's plugged into their computer or phone or connected via Bluetooth. There's an image of one of them here, which has plastic pins that rise and fall to form the various Braille characters, so eyes, ears, and fingers. So then, for a disability confident workplace, what should you be thinking about? Well, let's think about the start of an employment journey, and that might be your website, finding about your company, your recruitment process. Make sure that your website is accessible. And what do we mean by that? We mean that it's designed with accessibility in mind and to the international standards for web accessibility, which I'll mention in a moment. And also think about the recruitment process. So if you provide a vacancy pack or an application form, so on, make sure that those documents have been produced in a way that they can be used by someone using assistive technology. You haven't got images in there, for example, with no description, and that the form details can be entered and the text flows properly, and so on. So that's about your external website, but you may have an internal website, an intranet, which for someone who's succeeded in getting a role with you, you may rely on an intranet to make sure that you share processes, news about your company, and so on. So sometimes this is forgotten about. Companies focus only on their external internet, but think about what your employees need to use, and maybe not only read on, but contribute to. If you have processes that are used for maybe sales leads or completing expense forms or booking leave and those sorts of things, those also should be accessible to people with disabilities. The good news is there are free as well as paid for tools to help you check the accessibility of websites. And the terminology that you might hear is WCAG. It's a kind of strange acronym. It's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines from W3C, which is the organization that governs and progresses the web. There's lots of information out there for your internal web team, if you have one, or for your external contractor. You can get a web accessibility audit if you want to go that far, and there are several companies out there, and indeed charities such as RNIB, who offer a service to come and look at your website, your documents, your intranet, and give you advice on that. So talking about documents, let's go back a bit. This is really critical because we rely on electronic documents for all those things like company policies and product information, for your team members participating in projects and working groups, and of course carrying out critical work tasks. And the documents these days typically have got accessibility features built in them. Awareness of them is actually a little bit low. So Microsoft, for example, has a built-in accessibility checker. You can get to it by going to the Review tab, whether you're using Word or PowerPoint or Excel. And in the Review tab, there's something called the Accessibility Checker. It will do some automated checks of your document, your slide deck, or your spreadsheet. There are issues, and it'll tell you how to fix them. For Google Docs, if you're using the Google Suite, there's a product called Grackle Docs, which has a free tier. And the great news is that by making documents accessible, they're more usable by everyone. So a couple of examples: if you use heading styles, for example, in your word processing documents, your regular enhanced jump around your longer documents and reports, as well as someone who's using a screen reader being able to navigate that document more quickly. And if you're using styles, for example, for formatting, that makes it easier for folk who want to make a larger copy of the document, or indeed use a screen reader. But it also means that someone who wants to make some adjustments to the way that document looks before printing it out, that's so much more quick and easy for them to do. So for more information on access to content, where better could you go than UCAF, which is the UK Association for Accessible Formats. You can visit their website at ukaaf.org, UCAF, and on this website there's guidance on accessible websites and documents, including helpful videos and how-to documents. There's information about companies that can help you with accessible document production, and links to lots of other information. And with that, Noel, why don't I draw that piece to a close?
Thanks, Richard. So the very last thing Richard mentioned there is accessible documents. And while Richard was speaking, Lisa uploaded a white paper from Dolphin headed Creating Accessible Documents. This is 101 stuff, and it kind of should be mandatory in every organization. And Richard has just done a fantastic job highlighting it. Richard, are you still with us?
I am here.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we have quite a few university people on Zoom today. And in my experience, one of their biggest issues is inaccessible image PDFs. They've got several journals that are still in this image PDF format. Do you have any suggestions for those guys?
Yeah, well, they're not alone. This is a challenge all around the world, and our organization is international. I spend a lot of time working at the other end of the problem, which is with publishers, the journal platform, that new journals that come out are actually accessible using HTML, EPUB, and PDF. But for that remediation piece, well, there's a long, well-trodden path of either using external companies to help remediate those if that's happening in bulk. There are several available, and you can find some of them through the UCAF site, or you yourself can learn how to convert an image PDF to an accessible one. There are products like scanning products like Abby Fine Reader, for example, and there are products like Dolphin Converter will take an image PDF and turn that either into an accessible PDF or even better into another format, which is easier again for everyone, because reading a PDF, for example, on a phone is really hard for everyone. I mean, Adobe say the experience sucks. So there are formats that work better for some people, like Word or HTML or EPUB, and then you can use apps like Easy Reader, for example, to access that. But yeah, going from an image to an image PDF, you need to use a scanning product like Abby or one of Dolphin's products. And there are commercial grade companies that will do huge, massive numbers of PDFs if you have a whole archive that needs doing.
Yeah, no, that's important to say. And just to be aware of the earlier article that was uploaded from Aleister Mcnaught about public sector bodies requirements to have accessible documents needs to be borne in mind as well. So this problem is not going away, guys, other than the new formats are coming in, more accessible ways.
Wow, we've got some questions coming in. I can deal with them really quickly because I think that's respectful. So there's a question around Verdana 14. Is that still recommended, or are there other fonts? Verdana is a great font. Basically, there's a range of fonts, and just because we're making stuff accessible doesn't mean it can't be attractive, and you can be creative with it just within bounds. So you're not limited to a single font. There are various fonts. In my presentation, I used a font called Atkinson Hyperlegible. It's a free font developed by the Braille Institute in the States, and it's been made to be extra usable by people with low vision. There's about 4 or 5 of those, but basically avoid fonts that are twiddly, that are too thin, where their letter shapes are too common. So Verdana, Arial, these are fine too. And the beauty of having a document in a digital format is the individual can actually choose a font that's familiar to them. This is important for folk with dyslexia. I know this is a visual impairment slot, so providing the ability to be able to customize, personalize the font too. Can spreadsheets be read aloud? Yes, but often that's not a great way to read them. But it provides me the opportunity to say that products like Microsoft Word have a read aloud function. To voice a spreadsheet, usually you wouldn't be using read aloud, which is kind of just reading through left and right. Someone with a vision impairment would be using a screen reader for that, so they navigate around the spreadsheet, helps them, or row header, for example, or accessing the question about an NHS system. I don't know. It sounds like there's some consulting that's needed for that. And is ABBYS developed by the KGB? Well, that's a that's a new one. That's a conspiracy theory, I think. I think of the different OCR systems, this is used. I use it all the time, and lots of US and other organizations use them. And if there's a conspiracy theory, surely it would be in the US, and I've not heard that one before. But thank you for giving us a laugh, Bob.
Yeah, you're a star, Richard, and you, Bob. Thank you for that. That's fantastic, as I expected. Our next speaker is Stuart Lawler, another one with an Irish accent. Stuart is head of digital content at Sight and Sound Technology, managing the company's online presence. Stuart sits on a number of working groups with the International Council of English Braille, the ICEB. Sight and Sound is a UK and Ireland provider of hardware and software for blind, visually impaired, and people with learning and reading difficulties. Stuart is going to let us see JAWS in action. This is a screen reader for people who are blind. I hope he turns up the speed during this demonstration. You'll see what I mean. Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you, Noel. Good morning. I'm going to do the typical blind thing to start this and say, can everyone see me okay? And hear me and see me, because I've just turned on my camera, so I hope I'm looking straight. So it's great to be here, and thank you everybody for the invitation. It's really interesting. I was just thinking this morning, I've gone to, I'm sure just like everybody else, I've gone to so many online conferences over the last 18 months. And what typically happens for me anyway is I kind of listen in the background and I'm doing other things at the same time. But this morning I haven't stepped away from this at all, because the content has just been outstanding. And it's a credit to all the speakers and all the presenters. So thank you very much for that. And I just want to go back to something that Steve Tyler said earlier on when he was talking about the whole question of, what do you do as a disabled person? I suppose for any of us, what do you do is so much about work and how we contribute. And that piece around work is so important. So I'm going to share my screen, but not just for a moment, because when I share my screen, you're also going to hear my speech. And Noel mentioned cranking the speed up. I normally start with the speed slow, but we might crank the speed up at the end just to give you a sense of how a screen reader operates. So as Noel said, I'm from Sight and Sound Technology with a strong Irish accent, just like Noel. He never lost it. I don't know how long he's been away from Ireland, but he never lost it. And I've been with Sight and Sound just over 3 years. And we do all sorts of things at Sight and Sound. As I guess some of you know already, our website is sightandsound.co.uk. One of the things I do want to, I suppose, mention in relation to products, we're not just about product. A lot of what we do in Sight and Sound is about service, providing technical support, lifetime technical support, and training. And one of the things with the screen reading technology that I'm going to show you this morning, training is essential. We're not even scratching the surface of screen readers this morning, but we're just giving you a really quick overview as to how this sort of stuff works. So let's step back for a moment and just talk about what a screen reader is and how it operates. Screen readers essentially capture text or other images and graphics, and it was quite an interesting question there in the previous presentation about graphics in PDF files, which we all have come to know and love, I think, at this stage. But it captures text essentially and outputs it in high quality synthetic speech or refreshable Braille if you choose to use that as well. And we could spend a whole segment talking about Braille, which we don't have time for today. The screen reader I'm talking about today is JAWS, which is made by Vispero, who were known, or rather who are part of, or rather who's one of whose company is Freedom Scientific, who people may know. And JAWS is probably the screen reader that's most widely used throughout the world. It's been around for a very long time, and it's an acronym for Job Access with Speech. So straight away, there's an element of making the workplace accessible. One word I want to link with screen readers is efficiency and productivity, I suppose, 2 words maybe. We want blind and low vision people to be able to do the very same tasks at the very same speed, if not faster than their sighted colleagues. And as somebody who's been blind since birth and who's been in the workplace,
meeting stuff, you know,
who's been in the workplace for about sorry, I need to unmute myself, apologies. For someone who's been in the workplace for that length of time, I think it's really important to be able to perform equally to your sighted colleagues. And that's a key element of screen reading. It's one thing getting the speech output, it's another thing manipulating the screen reader to make sure that you get the necessary text, I suppose, that you need at the time that you need it. So with all that said, let's give you a quick look at how JAWS operates. I'm going to show you 3 applications that are mainstream applications that I guess we all use every day in our work. And I'm going to share my screen, and I'm also going to share my sound. So you will hear me and you will hear JAWS, and you will probably also hear any of the Zoom messages that come up. So if people are typing into the chat, for example, you might hear that, but I'm going to kind of ignore the chat and ask Noel then at the end if it's okay. If there are any questions on chat, I'm happy to answer those as well. So let me share my screen, and I'm going to share my audio.
Screen share, Zoom meeting.
And I'm hoping if anyone can verify for me that you can hear JAWS, that would be really good.
Participants can now see your screen.
So hopefully you are.
Folder view.
Yes.
So yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much for the confirmation. So I'm on the desktop, and as I say, we're really barely scratching the surface of what a screen reader does. But as I move around my my screen here on the desktop,
Windows, Microsoft Teams, DBT12 table dash toolbar.
JAWS is reading the name of the application to which I have focus. So I'm going to go to Microsoft Outlook really quickly.
Outlook.
And I did that quickly by pressing the letter O. This goes back to productivity. This goes back to doing something quickly, to being able to quickly access information. So I've pressed the letter O to open Microsoft Outlook, and Outlook is going to load for me.
Opening dash Outlook.
Once Outlook loads and goes into my inbox, I'll be able to simply read, arrow around here, read the messages that are in my inbox.
Unread. Angus, World Site Day event.
And you can see there's some unread messages.
Graham Martin, replied. Caroline Smith, FW, at shorts at the Graham Martin,
So here's a message that somebody sent me. I can press enter to open this, and JAWS will begin reading it to me automatically. But I can also interrogate that message further if I want.
The offer, Stuart, period. Let me speak to Linda for and.
So I'm going to close that message, and I'm going to quickly go to my calendar because I want to show you how easy it is to, I suppose now we all live out of our Microsoft or Google calendars, depending on what we're using. So let's jump quickly to the calendar.
Go to one.
And I want to check what I have, what I'm doing tomorrow. So let's flick to Thursday.
Thursday, 14 October 2021, 4 items.
So I know there are 4 items or 4 things I'm doing tomorrow. I'm going to tab through these and listen to what they are.
Janet Grant Braille Sense 6 email. Hold for living with sight loss course, World Sight Day lunchtime session, Getting to know your Braille Sense 6 weekly clinic and training events,
Now I've shortened those a little bit, but it would have read to me the start and end time and the location, if there was a location. So that's Microsoft Outlook. I'm going to close Outlook really quickly because I'm very conscious of our time. And I'm going to very briefly show you Microsoft Word.
Meeting.
I suppose Word is one of those things that everybody's using.
Julie Wheatley.
So let me go back to my desktop. There are multiple ways to open applications on Windows, of course, as we all know. And when we're training people with screen reading, we tend to mention a number of them and let the user pick the one they want most.
Window Word.
There's Microsoft Word. Let me press enter.
Opening dash Word.
So JAWS tells me that Word is opening, and I will crank up the speed in a moment, as Noel suggested. And here we are in Microsoft Word, so I can start typing. I'm typing, because I use the screen reader all the time, I have switched off a lot of the verbose feedback, I suppose, if you want to call it, from the screen reader. And by that, I mean, I've switched off things like the keyboard echo. So when you install JAWS out of the box, it will automatically speak every key that you type. And every time you press the space bar, it will say the words that you've just typed, which is very helpful for newbies, people who are just getting used to this stuff, but maybe not so useful for people who are experienced screen reader users. And again, it goes back to that productivity word and getting things done quickly.
Hello, this is a test for MS Word.
So I've just typed something really quickly. And I want to get some information on the characteristics of the text. I want to know the size of the text on screen, and I want to know the font I'm using. So I will issue a command and ask JAWS to tell me that.
14 point, black on white, Arial, normal style.
So there you go. You can see that, you can see the font. I could change the font size now. I could underline or bold something, and I could be checking as I go along to make sure that my text is okay. I suppose one of the things, again, as blind people using screen readers, we often have to produce or present information to sighted colleagues. We want to make sure that that looks absolutely perfect. I'm going to very quickly go into Microsoft Edge, which is my browser of choice, but you can also use Google Chrome. You can use Firefox. You can use the Opera browser. We've had people using Brave. A number of different browsers all work well with JAWS. I could talk at length about how JAWS and indeed other screen readers work on the web, but we don't have time for that. But essentially, now that so much of our working life is spent on the web, it's a place that screen readers have invested a lot of time in getting right. And the web, by its nature, of course, is always developing and changing. And I don't know, for the better all the time, but screen readers are always to some degree trying to catch up. So something that changes in a change to a site or a Microsoft update, your screen reader should pick that up very soon. So I'll just go to Microsoft Edge, and enter here to open Edge. And I'm going to open the BBC News website.
Loading page www.bbc.co.uk/news home-bbc.
And now I have essentially a page open with the BBC News stories, which may to you look visually quite different to what I am hearing with the screen reader, because the screen reader repaints, if you like, the text on a web page to make it slightly easier to navigate for users who can't see, because visually I don't really need to know the layout of the page. There's no advantage for me to do that, but what I do need to be able to do is get access very quickly to the information on this page. So let me whiz through some of this.
Top stories heading level 2.
So I'm basically issuing commands to ask the screen reader to give me key pieces of information on this page, and skipping a lot of the stuff that you'd see at the top, the navigation elements.
EU to offer fewer NI border checks on British goods heading level 3 link. Related content will NI protocol to Havana syndrome report and Korean soldiers smash bricks and bend iron.
So I'm just flicking through the news stories here. These are all JAWS has mentioned to me the word link there at some point, and link tells me that that menu links me to something else. In this case, it links me to the full story. So if I was to enter on that link, it would open that page and read the particular news story to me. There's lots of other things that you can do with screen reading, both on the Windows, Mac, and mobile platforms. There's loads of stuff out there available. JAWS is definitely highly customizable. I would say no two screen reader users use their technology in the same way. And if you want more information, please do go to sightandsound.co.uk. I should say, because I'm primarily responsible for producing a lot of our online content, there's a whole rake of stuff available on our YouTube channel and podcast page. We have a lot of webinars, we have tutorial videos, and we're all the time producing more. So if you need something, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us.
Stuart, there was one question that came up a couple of times, which is, are there other voices?
Yes, it's a good question. There are lots of other voices, and there are probably lots of voices that sound a lot better than what I'm using. But because I've been using this stuff for so long, and because I crank this thing up so fast, I find this voice easiest to listen to. But there are what we call natural sounding human voices produced by companies like Nuance, for example, that really are incredible and that have used real humans to generate the voice patterns. I don't personally use that, but there's lots out there to choose from. Some are free, some are paid.
Thank you ever so much. So that was Stuart from Sight and Sound. The next speaker is Steve Bennett, and Steve's going to talk about low vision solutions. And if you look behind me here, you'll see the dolphin photo. So Steve is one of the best known, most liked, and most authoritative people in the industry. And he's also managing director at Dolphin. Dolphin is one of only 2 companies who specialize in the development of software magnification and screen reading. When I became involved with Dolphin 30 years ago, I thought I was seeing magic, honestly. I was watching people with limited or no vision fly across the keyboard and navigate through the screen. Steve will demonstrate Supernova to show how people with low vision use their PCs in the workplace today. I think it's still magic. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Noel. Thank you so much. And thank you, Stuart, for the wonderful demonstration. Good morning, everybody. As Noel said, I'm Steve Bennett from Dolphin Computer Access. I've merged my background because I've got a bit of an untidy office, so please apologies for that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just share my screen. I've got a 1-page PowerPoint presentation, and then I'll show you some of the software that is actually working. And I hope to cover some different aspects of how people would use the software. So just bear with me a second while I just bring up my 1-slide of PowerPoint. Okay. So I thought it might be useful to actually look at the story of some of the people that we work with and who work here. So Lizzie is an electrical administrator, so she's one of our customers. So Lizzie started working in that job about 5 years ago. So she suffers from blurred vision and has no peripheral vision. Her sight is not stable and varies during the day.
Hello, just a quickie. Yeah, fine. You know, before we was getting the money
anyway,
from
I'll keep going.
Amadi Park.
Somebody needs to mute.
Shopping.
Okay. All right. So if I then go to Colin, Colin is registered blind, but would never describe himself as such. Diagnosed with Stargardt's disease at the age of 12, he inherited degenerative condition, part of the macular degeneration group. He's lost about 30% of his central vision over the last 20 years. His sight is stable day to day, and he mainly uses the magnifier with the addition of speech for reading longer documents. And Colin has been working with us here for about 10 to 12 years now. So Neil with 2 L's, he has retinoid pigmentitis, RP, was diagnosed at 17 when he started. He just used the magnifier when he came, but now he just uses speech. And to give you some idea, when Neil came to Dolphin about 25 years ago, he was in fact the pool champion. So now he's just a speech user. AJ is another support engineer for us. AJ is blind from birth. He uses the screen reader with high-speed speech and braille for accuracy. And in this marketing communication role, he's right to inspect a lot of copy. So speed for reading to him is important. No, it is. And then The other Neil is the IT support manager. So Neil also has Stargardt's disease. So I've watched his site sort of slip away since he's been here about 17 years. Yep, everybody stays a long time at Dolphin, thankfully. So Neil now mainly uses speech. He uses some magnification. He walks to work every day, as does mostly what Colin does. AJ, of course, has another means to get in, as does Neil. All of them have one thing in common. None of them are employed because they're visually impaired. They're all there because they're really good at their job. Okay, it's not the visual impairment that's the common denominator. It's the fact that they're just excellent at their job. And what our assistive technology does is levels the playing field for them, nothing else. Okay, so I'll just stop sharing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my camera. So the camera is sat over a monitor, and it just might go a little bit blurry, and then it will sharpen up, if I hope, and then it will come there. So just bear with me while I just do that. And now it's not doing it for me, so I'm going to try something else. Okay. And the best demos ever always have this issue. So let me just try that. All right. Okay, well, just bear with me. So what I've actually got here is it's a Surface Pro unit. And while I just sort out the camera issue, which has only just occurred, the little tinker. All right, I'll just put that back. Let me just swap the camera back again. I'll just see if I can get that to work. Okay, and then sometimes that works for me. I had this issue once other time in the 150 demos that I've done. I'm not sure why it's occurring now. Okay. Oh, okay. Let me just try and do that. All right, I'll bring it a bit closer. So my apologies. I'm sure it will come right in a second. All right. Darn. I've never seen that before. What am I going to do?
Steve, hi, it's Caroline.
Yeah.
Someone's in the chat, Liam from Matchware, suggested that because you have your background blurred, that might be why it's doing it.
Oh, of course it is. Yeah, thanks, Liam. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's a rookie error. Thanks, Liam. Lovely. Okay, all right. So what I have here is, again, it's a Surface Pro. I've got a camera sat over it. Then rather than sharing my screen, I've done it this way, and I'll explain it a little bit more later. So the basic principle of magnification is the software sits on top of a standard PC. It's not a special PC. It doesn't need any special video card. Doesn't need a special screen. It's a standard PC. And just like JAWS, you put it onto any PC you wish. You can put it on a workstation, you could put it across a network, or you could put it on VMware or Citrix or terminal services. It will work on all of them, Dolphin, Supernova. So it's entirely up to you how you use it. If you've got staff that are working remotely, then that's entirely fine. We have a solution, technical solution for you to be able to use. All right, so let me just turn the magnification on, which I'm going to do with the keyboard. And then what I'm going to do is show you that. I've just blurred out a part of the screen there. So at ×2 magnification, what we actually do is we present 25% of the screen. Have we changed the computer? Absolutely not. What you're seeing now is the output after the computer has outputted it that goes to the monitor. So we change that image, nothing else. So again, it can be a standard computer. So if I was to bring up an application like something like Word, which I'll just pop into now, and we've got a document sat in here. So we're all from Worcestershire, and we've got this document. If this is too small for me, because I've got a touchscreen device, I can move my fingers apart, and then it will get large, and we can see how beautiful and clear the text remains at all times. If I want to move it around, I can do that with one finger. If I want to touch at a particular place, then it'll pass that through and it'll insert the cursor here. So now, again, I'm using standard computer, standard monitor, nothing needs to change here. So how does the magnification work? What I'll just do is move to the right-hand side on simulate typing by actually moving the right arrow across there. We can see it tracks with me. Where's the mouse? If I touch the mouse appears in the center of the screen. If I was to move the mouse and just have a look at what time it is 11:39. Where was I typing? If I touch the left or the right cursor, then it will jump back to that location. And now if I touch the mouse, okay, the mouse will appear in the center of the screen. Okay, there we are there. So magnification follows the user, not the other way around. And I can show that again if I press the Alt button, which is a Microsoft Word option. Okay, what it will do is it will jump to that location. And as I press the cross, then it does that. If I press Escape to go back to where I was typing, yeah, it's followed me. So you don't have to rush around the screen finding where you were. You just use a few of the keyboard options and then you're able there. If you wish to just change that, and of course you can use your finger or you can use the keyboard or you can use the mouse. You've got all those options. Where was I typing? There it is again. I can jump back to that location. So within the software, we've got some options. One of the most widely used options is to actually reverse the colors. And for many visually impaired people, one of the issues of magnification software is we make the white background bigger as well as the text. So if you actually reverse the colors, and we have something like 30 different color options, as long with color replacement, if you're colorblind, then you have that option to be available there. So if I just pop up the control panel of our software, and I'll just bring the magnification down a little bit, we've got a lot of different options in here. And that's because what we've tried to do is suit all of the people that I mentioned, make sure that their magnification needs, their sight of needs are actually catered here. So if I don't like my particular large mouse, okay, and I want to change it to a different color, blue is my new favorite color. I'm just going to change it to blue. All right, and I'll just click apply. Okay, and then there we are. It's as easy as that. Lots of different options available for people to use. So you can also add things like cameras in here if you wish as well. So I've attached a little camera at the back. It's a webcam, or you could use the camera which is on this particular device. But if I select this option in here, what we call it Connect to Learn, there's a piece of paper on a £99 camera from Amazon behind here. And I can see it's the upside down. So I'm just going to use the touch screen, or I could use the mouse. And now I'm going to make that piece of paper bigger. I don't have to move the piece of paper. I don't have to move the camera. What I can just do is I can move it around on the screen. So now I've not only got something to use the computer, now I can start reading text next to me as well. And you might think to yourself, that's the wrong color. So you can change the colors as you wish to what suits your particular day, if you want to do that. You can, of course, if you wish, take a picture of it. Now it's sat in the clipboard. And lastly, you can OCR it. So if you wish that text, that picture to be converted to text, then it will be made available. And it's just spun off, and it's actually OCRing that piece of software. And then it will bring it back in a way that I can actually use it as text as well. So here we are. So I can highlight it in the document, and now I can read it if I wish. And we've got an option to be able to add reading.
To a wireless signal at a friend or family's house, in a coffee shop, on a train.
Okay, and that's one of the voices that Stuart was referring to earlier, which you can get with other software. So that's a nuanced voice called Serena. And of course, we have the more slightly more robotic, which you can actually speed them up. So one of the things that the more human sounding voices do is they say the word faster, where the TTS, which Stuart uses, it makes sure it keeps the pitch so we can hear the word when it's running at pace as well. So that's why he prefers to use that, I suspect. So I can then output that into my document if I wish to do, and I'll just go back, or I'll go back to my camera view, and then I'll come back again into my original document. So I can share half the screen if I wish, or I can have it on a separate monitor. That's available in there as well, be able to use. So, so Dolphin Supernova, again, it comes with 3 installs, so you can put it onto 3 different PCs. We license users and not PCs, so if the user's using different PCs, they can use that across there as well. So lastly, I'll just run a bit about Dolphin. We're based in the UK, again, Worcester, but they're there. And this is where our support team are as well. And of course, our development team are here too as well. I'll just come back, Hope that's given you a good overview of the software. And thank you to Caroline, who realised my schoolboy error in the blurred, which I think I did last time as well, but forgot Caroline. All right, thank you, Noel.
Thank you, Steve. Steve, I think, are you going to Robin's workshop later?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and I think Stuart is as well. So if you want to meet those two guys there later, you can. Right, so our next speaker is James Cooney from Gordon Morris, and now we're moving over into hearing impairment. James, as I said, is from Gordon Morris. The company was built on the founder's twin foundations as a qualified sound engineer and hearing aid user. James himself has been working in the hearing sector for over 7 years, and James will help us understand why challenges exist and what options are available to ensure hearing loss doesn't become a barrier in the workplace. So welcome, James.
Thank you so much, Noel. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I'm sure someone will jump in should you not be able to. So I'm just going to share a quick little PowerPoint that we can run through. Just give it a sec. Right, so just in terms of kind of why do challenges exist with hearing loss? Hearing loss, I think, is sometimes a little bit misunderstood. I think we think as long as someone has hearing instruments or hearing aids on their ears, they should be able to hear us, right? Unfortunately, that's not the case. So I always start off a couple of these presentations by Dr. Mark Ross, who was an audiologist with hearing loss himself. I'm not going to read through all of them, need not worry. But just to kick it off with the first one, to paraphrase, if all conversations took place at a distance of no more than 1 meter in a quiet, non-reverberant room, we would not need any assistive listening devices. They just wouldn't be necessary. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Life is messy, life is loud, and we might need a shout across an office. We might need to have a conversation between individuals of 4, 5, or 6 meters and above. And that creates a couple of challenges for those with hearing loss. The reason for this, just to give a bit of background on it, is simply physics. So microphones have a critical listening distance of around about 1.5 meters. Anything outside of that, we see the law of diminishing returns take effect. So 1.5 meters, that's where all of the wonderful hearing instrument technology can do its job, as long as speech between the listener and the speaker is within that little critical listening distance bubble. At 3 meters, we lose 50% of the speech intelligibility for that particular user wearing the device. At 4.5 meters, we lose a whopping 76%. So imagine you were listening to me speak and you could only hear around about 24% of what's being said. That's quite challenging. You probably may struggle to fill in the gaps, and more importantly, you might not feel super confident to follow up with questions because you might just keep thinking to yourself, well, I must have missed something. And that's where the challenge is. It's about empowering individuals in the workplace with hearing loss to at least contribute, jump into meetings, have confident communication. And unfortunately, with hearing aids alone, we cannot achieve that. They will need peripheral devices around the hearing instruments, purely because of the critical listening distance that we need to overcome in the workplace in particular. So if we then consider what could be a challenging situation for someone with hearing loss, if we went into large meeting rooms with multiple individuals all trying to speak, that may be particularly challenging because there's multiple speakers, increased distances. Equally, different speakers have different enunciation, different energy in their voice. Some may be louder talkers than others. And that, again, creates a challenge. On top of this, imagine then just to the right, for if someone was doing a presentation. Again, that can be super challenging for that user, as well as small groups, and particularly online calls. With the COVID world that we've kind of gone through, we've definitely found a lot of individuals reaching out to Access to Work purely because they're really, really struggling with online calls. If you look a little bit deeper into the imagery on the screen, you'll also notice that there is some products that have been showcased in the animation, which is you can see through the sound waves of the green between the user and the one with the hearing loss. And I think what we're trying to showcase here is you can have microphones across the table, ensuring that you're bringing the conversation directly to those with hearing loss. And it can actually just be the norm if you are employing someone with a hearing loss in your team. They will bring an array of diversity, very different opinions, because of course they've had challenges in their life that none of us have had. And I think that's super, super important to identify with. But there is technology out there to support the working life. So we can overcome distance. We can also overcome multiple people within a meeting room through a multi-talker network. We can have, of course, cut out background noise, which is kryptonite to any hearing instrument. So Roger technology itself has directional microphones focusing on the wearer's voice to cut out any background noise. Equally, on a table in a meeting room, it'll use directional microphones to focus on whoever is speaking automatically in real time. As individuals were to change or stop speaking and someone else joins the conversation, again, those directional microphones will lock in on that new speaker instantly. And it's quite phenomenal how it works. You really can hear super, super well, especially if you have a hearing loss. But more importantly, those directional microphones cut out background noise. There's also an algorithm within the Roger microphone itself, which will enhance speech further and reduce background noise further by physically tagging it, reducing it with the use of the algorithm, and enhancing speech. We try and give a 20 dB signal to noise ratio. That might be a little bit technical, but the reason for it is to maintain clear, audible speech no matter the circumstance you're in. And I think that's super, super important to ensure that we have confidence levels where we are engaging at work. I don't feel bad that I think I've missed something. I can dive into the conversation, ask loads of questions, and add value, which is super useful. And of course, it's really easy to use. You get a 16-hour battery life, and more importantly, they connect to multimedia devices directly out the box. So within the packaging, you get everything you require to make sure that you can link up to your mobile phone, your work phone, your landline, or of course your PC at work. So everything is being streamed directly into your hearing instruments when you are using those type of devices. In terms of what the devices may look like, this again will just give you a bit of an insight in terms of these are not big, they're not cumbersome, you're not necessarily installing a massive loop system in the office that they need to rip out panels or anything like that. It is quite literally a device that is around about 4 centimeters in size that you would pop on the table. And that's all that's required to make sure that those with hearing loss are empowered at work and of course engaging in the workplace, which is why we're all here. So yeah, super, super important to see what they may look like. Just in terms of access to work, I'm sure someone has run through this already, but just to kind of jump in a little bit. So it's quite tough to figure out who is actually not eligible to apply for access to work. You could even be going for an interview, and of course you can have access to work funding supplied to you to ensure that you can carry out your interviews. It's quite incredible. On top of that, the examples of support that you can actually achieve. Granted, we're talking from a niche perspective, which is hearing loss, but more importantly, they'll even help you move location at work. It's incredible the lengths and the support that is available through access to work. And I think it's just important to make sure that everyone on this call today would kind of align with the fact that no matter what is going on, access to work really, really want to support. And I think that's the takeaway message. You've also got, of course, organizations around your business that want to support, and they are experts in the field that will be able to kind of guide you. So never be afraid to say, I'm not quite sure what the application process is. I'm not quite sure what this is. It's absolutely fine. Just reach out to any of these organizations and they'll absolutely support. Another little tidbit before I finish up is the economic benefits relating to access to work. You might find a couple of your staff members who have a hearing loss or any disability may turn around and say, do you know, I don't want to take taxpayers' money. They actually feel quite guilty going through access to work. And we're just going to flip that conversation on its head slightly, where the government actually recoups £1.48 for every pound they spend on access to work. And that's through, of course, tax, national insurance, and just the actual economic benefit of having someone employed who wasn't employed in the first place in terms of their spending power. So I think it's super, super important to make sure that individuals feel confident and comfortable, empowered to access to work, because it is there to absolutely support and help, which again is really awesome. So thank you so much. That is it from me. It was quite short and sweet, but I think the point is, if you guys are stuck or you need any advice, please reach out. We are here to help. My email's on screen as well as my mobile. Feel free to reach out directly to myself, or of course the team at Gordon Morris are absolutely capable and willing to support too. So just ring the office and they can walk through absolutely anything. So I'll stop sharing that at the moment.
Thank you, James. That was great. And we got a quick lesson on access to work as well. So we weren't expecting that one. So thank you, James. There is a question which you may or may not want to answer, but is the smartphone suitable as a low-cost amplifier?
Yes and no. It depends on the situation, okay? So that's a really good question because it might actually showcase what Roger is in a nutshell. So any microphone will overcome distance between a speaker and a listener with hearing loss, right? Which is awesome. So if I'm trying to have a conversation with you, Noel, and we were sitting 6 feet from each other, I'd have a great chat. However, in a dynamic situation where there's loads of background noise or multiple conversations happening around me, that microphone may start to get saturated by that level of background noise. So you do need to opt for a more dynamic microphone that will be capable of dealing with that level of background noise. Of course, I will always talk about Roger because I truly believe it's probably the best system on the marketplace to deliver that sort of noise suppression and of course clear speech. But there's other stuff out there and we're open to discussing that. We are independent, so we will discuss multiple situations and solutions that will fit the particular situation. So if there is a low cost solution that will deliver the results, as long as we know the full picture, we'll absolutely recommend a low cost option. It's always about a nice balancing act.
Yeah, there's a question here as well about typically how much would a system cost?
Yeah, so your system costs generally around about £1,000, give or take on either side, depending on the connection. So when I say depending on the connection, Roger is compatible with multiple manufacturers. It's the receiver side of things that make it compatible at a hearing instrument level. That receiver, depending on which receiver is required, will then either increase or decrease the cost if it's Roger that is suitable for the requirement that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and just quickly, if say a company like Alpha, we've got about 45 people working here, so you get the size of the organization. If we were to recruit a deaf person tomorrow, just really quickly, what would we need to do?
So all you need to do is encourage that individual to jump onto the government portal website. They would simply, quite literally, it takes about 5 minutes to complete an online survey. An assessor will then get in touch by phone. That is your initial consultation, if you will, where they're going to ask a couple of questions. If it's suitable or required, they will then send out a physical individual to the workplace to assess the needs in real time. That assessor will then decide what products are actually going to be recommended. We don't even get involved in that. We will support the assessor if they're not sure and we'll give them information, but it's that assessor who's making the absolute decision.
But the assessor is coming for the person, but what about the company? So what do Dolphin themselves need to do in terms of?
You wouldn't need to worry about anything. And that's kind of the beautiful part. Now, everyone around you is kind of going to do it for you. The only time you would need to step in or get involved is if you thought, do you know what, access to work isn't for us. We don't want to go through that process. We just want to buy the damn products. And a lot of companies do it that way, and that's totally fine. And then, of course, if that is the avenue you want to take, then you would have more involvement in terms of bringing someone into the organization or getting maybe a hear care champion or a disability champion to kind of liaise and lead this within the business. But that's a different conversation.
Thanks. See, that's great. Thanks, James.
You're welcome. Okay,
thank you. So next up are the workshops. Okay, so we've got 3 parallel workshops. Each includes a case study, typically is going to be, and some open discussion culminating in a set of actions. So the first workshop, you've met Adam and Megan earlier from Diversity and Ability, and they're going to run the communication tools and strategies. You've also met Robin Spinks, who's going to do the vision workshop, And we know that Stuart and Steve from Sight and Sound and Dolphin respectively are going to be there. And the hearing workshop is going to be run by Mark Gill from the National Deaf Children's Society. So Caroline's just sent me a note, which I'll deal with in a sec. Mark works, you haven't met Mark, so he works in the National Deaf Children's Society and he's on the roadshow team. Part of his role is to travel around the country sharing information and resources with deaf young people, their families and professionals. He's very experienced and he has the honor of attending the Deaf Olympics twice in Taiwan and Bulgaria in the role of football coach for Great Britain's men and women's team.
Sick.
Right, so at this point, you're ready to be teleported to your desired workshop. Teleported, there's a word I never thought I'd use in adult company. So you've got to select, I've got a message here I need to check because there's some.
No, anybody that has signed, anybody that has filled in the forms previous to today's call, I have already allocated you to your room. If you haven't yet selected which room you're going to, you will need to click on the three dots, select breakout rooms, and then pick which room you want to go to. You cannot do that until I have opened breakout rooms, so I will open those now. There we go. You should now have the option to select which room you'd like to go to. Does anybody need any support?
Hello, can you hear me at all?
Raymond, I can hear you. How can I help?
Yeah, for some reason my screen has gone blank. I think it's Zoom playing about. I've managed to find the breakout room button, so I've got a box come up that says breakout rooms in progress, and it's a totally blank white box.
Okay, which one would you like to go to? Hearing, vision, or communication?
Hearing one, please.
There we go. You should have a request to join.
Hi, this is Stuart from Sight and Sound. I need to be put in the vision one as well, please. I can't see.
There we go. Does anybody else need any support?
Hello, I'm Kanagasabe, permanent intern. I'd like to go to communication tools, please.
Okay, there we go. Would anybody else like to be put into one of the workshops? Laurie, I can see your request. You've already had an invite to join. If you click on the three dots at the bottom of your screen and click breakouts, you should be able to join that way. Great. Hi, Catherine. Would you like to go to one?
And to do a 2-minute summary of the communication tools and strategies.
We can do that. We can do that. We had really good interactive conversations with everyone in the room. I think really what we realised, what came out of the conversation, where there's some amazing technology that could be used to support barriers around communication. We've already heard about the Roger system today that came up. We also talked about other things like having appropriate meeting etiquette, so meeting people's mic when they're not speaking, that kind of thing can help with communication barriers. I think one thing that came up from one of the participants was having conversations with individuals about what adjustments they need on a regular basis is really key to creating an inclusive workplace. So recognizing that individuals' needs will change over time, and it's not just about putting adjustments in place at the start of someone's employment. It's about making sure we have regular conversations with individuals to make sure we're always doing the best we can in the workplace to have the right adjustments and the right technology in place to enable people to thrive. And we talked about loads of different available assistive technology. We talked about low-tech things such as having adjustable lighting, maybe to support lip reading. There's a really good conversation. But I think to summarize, it's about making sure we continue having conversations in the workplace about what we can do to make the workplace more inclusive.
Thank you, Adam. That was great. So, Robin, have you got a couple of insights from yours?
We have, thanks, Noel. We had a really good discussion, actually, and I think there are some real nuggets in here. First up was to invite people to coffee or to lunch, and let's just not underestimate the impact of those incidental interactions, the less formal interactions that maybe people have over coffee or lunch, or who knows, a visit for a drink to the pub after work. You know, the chance to just be in a less formal environment and to open up and learn from someone what really helps, what matters for them. The small informal and social things. So check what technologies work for the person and make sure that those are appropriate to that context. Arrange an induction where the person can chat about their requirements, and also to have an induction to get familiar with the tech that they're using. So in our case, the person had been a student and was now coming into employment, but we want to check that the technology that she's familiar with is actually applicable and relevant at work, and that it can be accessed in the same way. We talked about the fact that everyone's different, and also that some training should be set in place, but also mentioned the cultural enrichment of people with disabilities is an understated point, really, is that having someone with a disability working in your team makes your team better. That's absolutely a learning that I think everybody echoed. just in terms of being a natural problem solver, but also thinking differently and encouraging other people to think differently and think in a more inclusive way. Accessibility is no more work, so just build it in at the start. And that was a great point there, I think, brought in by Steve. I'm making it anyway, so I'm just going to make it more accessible at the start. Build it in at the beginning. Don't retrofit accessibility afterwards, because it can be clunky and difficult. And our kind of headline point above that is that nothing beats user involvement. Whatever you're doing, whether you're designing a hardware or software product or a service, absolutely nothing beats user involvement from the start. So that should be at the center of what we do.
Thank you, Robin. That was great. And finally, Mark, have you managed to sort out your co-hosting issues?
Yep, all sorted.
Good.
So hiya, yeah, my name is Mark. We were talking about lots of various things. We talked about reasonable adjustment, like others have already mentioned. We focused on a case study of a deaf person who works for Channel 4. And we talked about how we could make those reasonable adjustments for that particular person, because although they can hear okay, they rely on lip reading. And if most of us think about workplaces, we think about telephones, but we can connect things like Roger pens to telephones to cut off that background noise to enable that person to use the telephone. Also, you've got to think about the environment. So windows and doors being closed to cut off that external noise, and the positioning of the person within that office so that they are able to access other people within the room rather than have them facing the wall. Lots of people on our group had fantastic ideas. I think it was, it's always scary to put forward some ideas because you're not necessarily sure about what works for a deaf person, but like people have already mentioned, you ask the deaf person what you can do for them, what's best for them. And I think that's really, really key. There was one question that somebody asked, which was in regards to an organization, what they could do before a deaf person even applies for a job. So we have got something called Accessibility in the Workplace, which is a resource in which we can work alongside organizations so that they can understand how best to work effectively, whether that be via communication, technology, various different ways before a deaf person even enters the workplace. Stephen, I don't know if there's anything that you picked up on as well that was worth mentioning from the group. I don't know that Stephen can actually see me. Stephen's just saying, think that everything was covered. But yeah, so it's a good opportunity if anybody did want to look into it. We also talked about the Equality Act 2010 and the reasonable adjustments. So that gives you a good idea as to what you can put in place for a person. And I know that somebody mentioned captions on the digital platform being a little, somebody had picked it up even just when we joined the main room about death, because obviously the automated captions picked up death rather than deaf. So you may need to think about things like a palm typist who will do it much more accurately as opposed to the auto-generated captions, which may come up with some funny alternatives. But I think a huge issue is the organizations not being too embarrassed to make those requests, to ask people what it is they want, like making sure that it's clear for everybody else, that they understand what's going to happen when a deaf person joins, but that the deaf person also feels confident when they do join that organization as well. That's it from me though.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. So just to paraphrase quickly what I think are the highlight items out of all that, you know, Adam and Robin and Mark all mentioned technology. It does amazing things to make the way clear for everybody. Talking, my goodness, you know, the experts about the person's disability is the person. So be really cool about going back and talking to those. And as Robin said, you know, go for a coffee, go to the pub, good places to talk. The environment is important, and getting advice from the experts about how do you make an accessible environment before the person with the disability, the specific disability, comes in. And Access to Work is a good source for all of this. And try and get it right from the beginning. Born accessible is a good phrase. It works. And I think the other thing Adam mentioned was our needs change. Robin echoed that as well. So again, keep the conversation going. So it was, sounds like I was in the hearing workshop. It was fantastic. And I'm guessing the others were as well. The day itself, I've really enjoyed. The speakers have been fantastic. I just want to thank all the delegates for turning up and for being nice. It's not always easy. The speakers, just as I say, I've enjoyed every one of them. I know most of them really well, so I knew they would be, and I'm really grateful. Miles and Caroline and Lisa have been fantastic as well. So really grateful to them as well. Tomorrow, we're talking about neurodiversity and mental health. And again, I can promise you a great day. So I look forward to seeing you then. Unless anybody has got anything important to add, we get to close a few minutes early. So that's always.
Can I just ask, is there a CPD certificate for today? Can I get one to add to my portfolio?
Regrettably, we haven't sorted that out. But Caroline, is this something that we're able to do? Caroline, you're on mute, I think.
Yes, sorry, hi, I'm here. I just had a phone call just as I was being asked a question, which is the world's most embarrassing situation. I'm sure we can give you something that's a BATA approved CPD version, but it will be an official CPD certificate, but we can certainly give you an attendance certificate if that's okay with you, Paula.
Yeah, does that work? Oh.
I'm sure we can come.
Yeah. Attendance certificate is what I need just to show work that I've actually been to one of these or more events. Anything I do, they like to know what I've done.
Yeah. Well, no, we'll sort something out for that then. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So otherwise, I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Caroline and Lisa and Noel, can you stay on the call?
Yep, no problem.
Just a second.
Yeah.
I'll just remove everybody else on here that I've got.